across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome to the show. Alex is here. Well, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Alex is here. That sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. My life is a bit of a horror movie at the moment. I'm in the process of moving house. You've all done it, haven't you? Yes, it's a painful experience, isn't it? So I must admit, I'm kind of relieved to be sitting in a nice air-conditioned studio where there's not a packing box in sight. And I'm going to be here for the next 3 hours. I was going to say cheering myself up, but looking at their headlines, it's the normal rinse of repeaters. Wake up, smell the doom, and continue with the day. But we're going to do it all together, aren't we, in what I like to call a little fix of communal catharsis, where we can all share in the misery of the state of the country together. It is so much better than yoga and meditation. I mean, seriously, the NHS waiting list, if you've got mental health issues, is way too long. You just tune into this, okay? It's company, it's common sense, and it's putting the world to rights. And my goodness, doesn't the country need it today? So you know what to do. This number that I'm about to tell you is your normal network rate, so you don't even really have to pay anything to take off the load. 03444991000 is the number to dial if you want to speak to Agony Aunt Alex today. You can also WhatsApp me on that number or leave me a voice note sharing your woes and your despair with the nation, and we'll play them out so you can at least feel a little bit like you're not alone in the world. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. Again, it's your standard network rate. If you're going to do that, though, you do have to write the word talk in capital letters before you write the body of your text message, and we're on X at talkTV. OK, shall we crack on with the aforementioned promise of mental health relief? I'm joined now by Jamie Jenkins, former ONS statistician, and Guy Dampier, senior researcher on nationhood at the Prosperity Institute, because we want to discuss the statistics that are out today on foreign-born prisoners. Because guess what? The number of foreigners in prison for serious, violent, sexual and theft offences has surged over the past year alone, according to official data that has been published for the first time today. Some 1,731 foreign criminals are in prison in England and Wales for sexual offences. 1 in 8 of the foreign offender prison population, and 10% of all sex offenders in prisons. Who'd have thunk it? It's as if you get men from these misogynistic countries who stone women to death, and they don't behave very well when they get here. I've been saying it for a long time. Finally, I'm being condoned for my positions. Let's speak to Jamie Jenkins first of all. Jamie, as a statistician, I want to ask you this. When we're looking at foreign-born prisoners in UK jails, when it comes especially to sex offences, these are people who have actually been reported to the police, who have been charged, who have faced magistrates and have been convicted, which makes me assume, therefore, it's probably the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, good morning, Alex. No, it will be the tip of the iceberg. And what you've got to consider when you start looking at the numbers is that we've seen this big rise, but I think part of the problem we've seen, Alex, over the last kind of 10 or 15 years is just the mass explosion of immigration into the country. And that's why we're seeing increases in our prison population, which is obviously overrun already. And we haven't got enough places for British criminals. So housing the foreign criminals as well is an issue. So since 2010, since the David Cameron government came in, we've seen in the England and Wales population alone an increase of 6.6 million. Now, just in the last 3 years, that's gone up 2.1 million. So this huge increase, government failure to kind of control the borders, has led in a lot of people who are criminals. Now, there's the sex offenders, there's also drug criminals, the Albanians. And you only got to go back a couple of years ago when you talk about the small boat crisis. Just a few years ago, the most common country people were coming in from was Albania, coming into the country on the small boats, no doubt going into these kind of drug gangs. And then rather than costing us money in hotels, they're now costing us obviously money in prisons. And it's pretty much government failure to protect the borders and protect British people.
Yeah, I mean, Guy, who would have thunk that when it comes to building a cohesive, high-trust society, it rather helps that people might be born in the same nation, share the same language, share the same culture, adhere to the same values. I mean, this just lays bare, doesn't it, the disaster that is the multicultural ideology.
Well, as you say, it's very, very difficult to have a cohesive society when you've got people from so many different places coming in such large numbers in such a short amount of time. And you can see that there is a pretty large culture clash between the way that we expect people to behave and the way that some of the people coming are used to behaving.
And going back to you, Jamie, when we've got these statistics about foreign-born prisoners, are we able to slice and dice quite who these people are? You spoke about things like organised crime, Albanian gangs and so forth. I mean, I've been onto the Organised Crime Index. It's a website I bang on about. It's a brilliant resource which is compiled by the likes of Europol and the CIA and Interpol and the like, which actually sort of explains in each country the nature of these sort of underground illicit industries that take place. And it's very clear that in the United Kingdom, it's no longer Peaky Blinders who are running the streets and the gangs. It is largely men who have deliberately come here from aboard to exploit us. But what about when it comes to things such as the sex offences, which is an area that I'm very interested in for obvious reasons. I'm a woman. I've been living in London. This affects me directly. Do we have any clear indication, at least statistically, of patterns that may exist when it comes to those offenders?
Yes, so I think the most important thing when we're looking at kind of the foreign nationals and kind of sex offences. Now, remember, the majority of people are British because there's more people who are British in the country. So you've got to look at it kind of on a per capita or kind of a rate basis. And if you then look at, say, the last year, the increase in the number of kind of foreign offenders, which you class as, say, foreign sex offenders, is almost 3 times higher, the increase, than on British nationals as well. So you've always got to look at these figures in context when you compare with the size of the population. And that's the stark thing here, that we've seen this increase in migration in the country, but the rate of foreign sex offenders is going up faster in our prisons than it is on British people. And that speaks to what the problem we've got in this society and the things that you're talking about. And we have seen, people charged, convicted in the system who've come over on the small boats for sex offences against young children as well. That's not a kind of putting any hatred out there. That's actual facts that are out in the system. There are other cases, obviously, that are ongoing at the moment, so we won't talk about those. But the facts are quite clear, Alex. The increase in sex offenders is faster for foreign nationals and British nationals in the latest set of figures that we've seen.
But when we talk about, first, two questions back at you, Jamie, here. So my first question is going to be, when we talk about the British prison population, I wonder how many of those are sort of born and bred British for multi-generations, or those who are now classified as British, but may have indeed come from different cultures in the first place anyway. But also, what I really want to understand is when we're talking, it's very easy to say foreign, isn't it? Foreign people are committing more sexual offences, but something tells me that these people aren't from Denmark and France and America and New Zealand, but probably from countries whose cultures, especially their attitudes towards women, are vastly different to our own.
Oh, no, definitely. There'll be that kind of pattern in the figures, and there'll be an element as well that you might have kind of second generation kind of people who were kind of born to parents who are from foreign nationals as well in the figures as well. And that's the big challenge that you've got. And it's the cost of all of this as well, Alex. It's, the Tory party put some estimates out about £360 million. It's just another thing on top of this massive tax bill that are increasing in tax to us. And that's the big problem is, we do also send foreign aid to some of the countries that we're hosting prisoners within our system. So, we've got a mechanism to get these people back and deport them back to their countries, because all the government needs to do, if you won't take them back, we'll stop the foreign aid coming to you. And that's pretty much what the government needs to do, I think.
Now, Guy, Jamie, they're laying out how much this is a burden on the taxpayer, but I would say it's a huge burden on womanity in this country, because for every single woman raped within the community, every other woman in that community then has to go about her life differently because she feels afraid. It affects her on an existential level. She wakes up in the morning, she questions what she's wearing, the hairs stand up on the back of her neck, she doesn't want to walk home at night. It affects all girls and women when you understand that the risk of sexual offences are very, very high within your community. And I really want to dig down into this, because I don't understand the ideology of a nation that thinks it is far, far worse to ask these questions and risk being called a racist than it is to be a rapist.
Well, it's been a taboo for a long, long time. And I think we would both agree that it's wrong. That actually the truth is the truth, and you should pursue it wherever it goes. It's pretty clear that there is no representation. It's pretty clear that some cultures have got very different cultural attitudes towards women and are distinctly overrepresented in some of these abuse statistics. So, you can look at some of the groups. A lot of Vietnamese
Which
come
cultures? I want to know which cultures, because again, we've been saying again, it's taboo. You can't talk about it. And I'm saying I want to, because like I said, I don't care if someone says you can't ask that question, you might be a racist. What I care is trying to stop people who are rapists. To me, being a rapist is far worse than being a racist.
Certainly. And I think if you look, we've got large numbers of small boat migrants that come from Vietnam. Now, those Vietnamese are often involved in organized crime, nail bars, money laundering, cannabis, that sort of thing. They don't seem to be terribly overrepresented in sexual assault statistics, whereas we can see that other groups, for example, Iranians or Eritreans are. So we can see that by and large what we're looking at is we're looking at people from the Islamic world and people from sub-Saharan Africa. Those seem to be the ones that are overrepresented in these. There'll obviously be a lot of controversy about where those deep cultural roots are or what the reason is why some groups are overrepresented, but you can work out who it is pretty easily.
Yeah, I think we all know it, don't we? And it's just a shame that nobody in any position of authority dares point out that men, particularly from the Muslim world, have very different social attitudes to women. Yes, it's not all Muslims. We can repeat that until the cows come home. But until we can identify that this is the pattern, we're not going to be doing anything about it. Much as Sir Keir Starmer seems unable to do anything about the small boats crisis, smash the gangs hasn't worked. Now, the tally has hit 25,000 for the first time, which is utterly, utterly insane. It's the number of people who've broken into the country this year. But Jamie, when we're told it's 25,000, those are the people that we've caught. I want to know how many more boats are turning up on the UK coastline that aren't intercepted or detected or monitored, because there are various unevidenced reports of people who live on the south coast saying, well, I've seen a dinghy pull up on wherever it is and they've just run off, got into vans and nobody's intercepted them. And also, I'm not sure these figures include people who have come over in the backs of lorries, people who fly into the country and then magically lose their passports.
Yeah, so the figures that we do know, and you're right to point out, there will be people who are coming into the country, and maybe they're the criminal ones as well. So if you're coming over on a small boat, you're not really wanting to go in a hotel and you're going to be working for some criminal gangs who are putting you on these boats. You're probably going to be more likely to be the ones who land on the shore and just vanish into the ethos of Britain. And the figures that we do know, so that's over 25,000, it's up 51% to put that into kind of context. So Starmer came in saying he's going to smash the gangs. It's up 51% on the same period last year. Now, if you kind of project that forward for the rest of the year, we're going to hit well over 50,000 this year. That'll be the record numbers that we've seen, since this started in 2018. And just in the last 8 days, we've had 8 consecutive days, Alex, of these numbers coming over, people coming over in small boats, 1,902 just in 8 days. And we talk about Macron was doing that kind of deal with Starmer. They haven't released the full deal. All the speculation is about 50 a week. So just to get the last people from the last 8 days, if you were to take them back to France, it takes 38 weeks to do that. But that doesn't reduce the numbers, remember, what this deal does. It just means that we give you back your 1,902 that's come over, and you give us another 1,902. So absolute nonsense, this talk of smashing the gangs. And the important thing in the last few weeks, Alex, is what's going on in Greece. So they've got numbers now, they're getting ridiculous. They're all landing on Crete, and Greece has suspended all asylum applications. They're kind of taking people, putting them in camps, locking them up and saying we're going to deport them. And maybe that's something now, it's starting across Europe, that Britain needs to consider.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, they've declared a national emergency. They are also signatories to the ECHR. They're members of the EU. They're in the UN. They are basically bound by the same international treaties that we are, and yet to realise that there is a lever that can be pulled where you can try effectively to stop this. And yet it seems to be that what our government wants to do instead, headed by Peter Kyle, who had the audacity to call Nigel Farage some sort of friend of Jimmy Savile the other day, the technology secretary, has been presiding over a department that thinks it's far better to try and go after and silence people wanting to talk about this subject than do anything about it. I think this is utterly chilling. A secretive Whitehall spy unit has been used by the government to target social media posts that have criticised migrant hotels and two-tier policing. Well, here's a message to you, Peter Kyle. I'm still here. My lips are still moving. I'm going to still talk about it. You just try and stop me. But the problem here, guys, this approach doesn't work, does it? Because what's happening now is the kettle boileth over. People are standing outside the hotels, waving their signs saying we want to protect our kids. And as far as I'm concerned, they've got every single right to do so. The government might try and stick a cork in the bottle, but that bottle is being very vigorously shaken.
Yes, indeed. The pot is boiling and the lid is beginning to chatter. There is an ultimate problem here, which is that unless you actually fix the problem, people are going to remain upset, and they're right to be upset about this. The government will not and is unwilling to actually do the things necessary to stop the problem, which only leads them to censorship. But censorship is a sign of their own weakness and their own failure, and it won't work because we are ultimately a democracy. There's only so much you can censor. We can all see, we've all been on Twitter, we've all seen those things saying that a particular tweet is withheld due to local laws. Well, I think that's just going to make people more upset because they can tell what the truth is and they can tell that the government's trying to hide it from them.
Jamie, I mean, one question I think a lot of people might want to ask is, with all of this taking place, with the amount of people coming in every day illegally and legally, how does this affect us in the long term? Because I think we've all got a sense that, when someone trashes the economy, you go through a period of pain, but you have a hope that one day someone's going to come along with the right economic policies and be able to rebuild what has been destroyed. And yet when it comes to things such as population change or demographic change, that feels permanent. Do you think that's the case?
Well, it's going to be a challenge, Alex, to kind of reverse a lot of what's gone on. So, and it's not just the last couple of years. You only got you said you're kind of buying a house, and I'm sure it's costing you an absolute fortune, because what's happened over the last 10 or 30 years is that we've had a huge increase in immigration. We haven't built the houses. So if you look at your salary to the average house price ratio, that's kind of rocketed up. And what that has also meant is that over time, people can't afford to have children earlier in life. So the average number of children born, say, kind of people in the UK has been falling. It's kind of a thing that's going across the Western world. So you've had repeatedly called for more immigration to fix the kind of the birth crisis that we've got, which then makes the birth crisis even worse. So you've got a lot of these competing different factors. And you need some radical change in society, Alex, to really fix this issue. We've got a continuation of migration coming into the figures. We've got a ticking time bomb with older people as well, and the cost of those. And if you just look at the progression or projections out to 2040, the government is not talking about this. They talk about, with NHS and the nurses' strikes, the junior doctors' strikes, we're going to have a huge number of people over the age of 75 in the next 15 years. They're not building the hospitals. We need a government who prioritises today, plans for the future, and forgets about all of this kind of foreign policy that Starmer seems to be interested in. Let's focus on Britain and get that right.
And finally to you, Guy, I mean, the thing is, when it comes to immigration, the thing that we all need to actually accept is there's good immigration and bad immigration. I am somebody who would stand by and champion people who come to this country, who speak our language, who share our values, who believe in Britain, who want to be part of building a nation, who contributes more economically, but also socially and culturally. They are part of the glue that binds us all together. But I get the impression over recent years, if not decades, what we have done is actually far outweigh those people who not only don't economically contribute in the long run, but actually create ghettoized neighborhoods.
Yes, I would agree with you. I'm married to an immigrant myself, and I'm very glad that she speaks English and she upholds our values and everything else. And I think most people have no objection with that. What people object to is that they can correctly see that there are people coming here who don't share our values. There are people coming here who are actively hostile sometimes to our country, and people who are basically living off the welfare state, which means that we are effectively having to subsidize them. That is obviously not right. If you come here, you've got to be able to support yourself, and those that can't should be returned home.
Both of you, it's been a great conversation. Jamie Jenkins, Guy Dampier, thank you ever so much. Now, if you'd like to join the conversation and vent a little bit, or maybe throw an opinion we haven't covered today, or a thought that hasn't yet crossed any of our minds, then please do get involved, because this show is as much about you as it is about anybody. 03444991000 is the number to dial. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, you have to write the word talk before you text. I'm going to have a little break now, get myself a cup of tea. I suggest you do the same, but don't be too long, because I'm back just after this.
Well, I think we've been discussing irregular, illegal migration is a huge issue in both our countries. In the United Kingdom, it is a real cause for concern, and that's why we must bear down on it in all its aspects, upstream, across Europe.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Well, we got out the box, didn't we, pretty quickly? Got off to a flying start. Moan of Arc at your service. But I think it's about time that I should hand the microphone to somebody else for a change. Let's speak now to Stephen, who is in Sheffield. Good morning, Stephen.
Morning, Alex. It's about the boats, and what I've listened to people speaking about. Well, it's a complex issue because of the law. And it occurred to me that why don't they use international maritime law? Like, for instance, isn't it illegal to permit a vessel to set sail on the high seas in an unseaworthy condition? And also, in the Human Rights Act, is it not illegal to allow people to put themselves in mortal danger? What I'm trying to say is, can't them laws be used with the French and then force them, because they're breaking the law by permitting it. Do you get what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, but it seems to me when it comes to the law and international law, countries like France just go buff and don't really care. They know those boats are leaving their shores, and they kind of want them to, don't they? That's the problem. But it's interesting, you know, everyone goes, oh, it's a complex situation, the law, human rights, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. Hold on, how is making people stay at home, decimating their businesses, preventing them seeing dying relatives, forcing them to wear a mask every time they leave their house? How on earth was that compliance with human rights law? It seems to me that if a government wants to suddenly pull the lever and do something pretty dramatic, we found out during COVID that it's possible. All you have to do is say, well, this looks a bit dodgy, this could become a bit of an emergency situation, we're going to have to take drastic measures. It seems to me now we've got those statistics on foreign-born criminals. Now we know who's actually making money from the human trafficking, the terrorist organisations, the ne'er-do-well states, the regimes against us trying to destabilise our societies. Now we can see the protests bubbling up all around the migrant hotels. Perhaps now the government could say, this looks like a pretty dangerous situation. We're actually going to take some decisive action. The problem is, and I don't know what you think about this, Stephen, I just get the impression a load of people in the Labour Party want to sing Kumbaya, and for whatever reason think people who come from countries that aren't our own need to be beatified and treated like poor lost souls.
Yeah, it's just, well, to me, yeah, I mean, my point was, why not use these laws against the French? Do you know, because rather than using immigration law, use that law. And as far as when I think about it, it's become so normal that if you stand back, it's just absolutely appalling that you're letting people literally invade the country on a daily basis. It's like, what the hell are you? It's like, it's just insane.
Yeah.
But it's become such a regular thing, it's almost normal, and most people don't even give it a second thought now.
It's crazy. We've all been brainwashed and gaslit into thinking that this is perfectly normal. They use funny language, don't they, like irregular migration. I mean, I was listening to a story today on the news about people in the north of England who can't afford to buy houses, and in order to get their deposits, they've been made to go down the building sites and actually push some wheelbarrows around and shift some sand and dig some foundations. And that way, instead of actually having to muster up the 10% for the deposit, they can use that to offset it. And I'm like, meanwhile, some character from Lord knows where is put up in a 4-star hotel at our pleasure, given a full English breakfast or whatever it is they want, given a mobile phone, given a yoga class, and they don't have to lift a blimmin' finger. It makes absolutely no sense to me. It makes no sense to anybody in the country apart from the tiny few who seem to hold positions of power who thinks that this is the way to run a blimmin' country. It isn't.
The only way, I have to be very, very careful in what to say. The only way that this is going to be resolved is by ordinary men and women of this country taking the country back themselves.
I think, in a way, Stephen, all you're doing is reflecting the mood of the nation because the democratic recourse on this issue has not been followed. People aren't allowed to have their voices heard at the ballot box on this topic. Successive governments have failed them. Not only that, we're learning that the country is trying to silence criticism of migrant hotels, trying to clamp down and censor online opinion, saying we've got a two-tier justice system. And so people are left with very little choice. I'm not condoning any sort of insurrection. I do think people have the right to protest. But if anything kicks off, the government needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and say, we didn't listen. Stephen, thank you ever so much. You know, on that topic, I was doing a bit of thinking the other day, as I'm minded to do, having a discussion with my other half. And we were talking about all those refugees welcome people with the banners standing outside the hotels, the counter-protesters. And it occurred to us, the real racists in this country are the people who are turning up trying to counter the good men and women of Britain who are worried about their communities and worried about a lot of men from other countries being brought in. The real racists are those people who seem to think if you're born with brown skin in another country, you're helpless, that you're incapable, that you need us to put a roof over your head, you need us to provide you dinner, you need us to give you a free phone, you need us to give you lessons in yoga and a free PlayStation. They're the real racists because what they do is associate somebody's skin colour and nationality with being weak and being a victim. Actually, I don't agree with that. When I see those men coming over in boats, I see fit and healthy and capable men. I see men willing to hustle. I see men that are prepared to risk their lives and pay criminals to get what they want. I don't see needy and vulnerable men. I see men who are highly sexual. I see men who are able to go about physically and do what they want. I see men who are probably capable of fighting. I see men who are probably capable of handling weapons. I see men who are alpha males, not the beta vegan soy-eating fayboys who are the ones carrying the placards with their big beards who wouldn't survive a second in a dinghy on a boating lake, let alone crossing the channel. No, the real racists are those who look at the men from other countries of fighting age and for some reason think they're like pets. They're the person who does the disservice to somebody's background and breeding and looks at these people as pathetic. The rest of us sees these men for what they are, more than capable. If they're prepared and able to cross various countries and get in a boat on the high seas, they're not that weak, are they? Those are the real racists, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but when I come back, I'm joined by one of my favourite people, Mr. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. He's going to be talking us through all of the stories of the day. That's after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Shall we kick things off with a cheeky little voice note, because Pete in Derby has lain down this track for us.
Hi Alex, Pete from Derby. I'll tell you what, I'll explain everything that people won't explain. These whole smash the gang thing that bloody Pinocchio's going on about, Keir Starmer, the real gang is him and his government. He has an ulterior motive, whatever that may be. Okay, right? Because if he wanted to stop the gangs, he could have stopped the gangs a long time ago, but he won't. And then when it's clearly pointed out to him about how to win the people over by Donald Trump, completely ignores it, squirms in his chair, and then bangs on about Gaza. You know, he's got no interest in this country. He's got no interest in the British people. He's got no interest in anything, actually, I don't think. I think he just sits there and smiles, go, yay, yay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. He is the real gang. They are the real bullies. And the next story we're going to be talking about very much exposes that, because it turns out, not that we didn't know anyway, that a secretive Whitehall spy unit has been used by the government to target social media posts criticising migrant hotels and two-tier policing. This is in the Telegraph. It can reveal that officials working for Peter Kyle, the technology secretary, flagged videos with concerning narratives to social media giants, including TikTok, warning they were exacerbating tensions on our streets. Let's speak now to Brendan O'Neill. It's funny, isn't it? We knew that the nudge unit was in full flow during COVID. In fact, people were demonised for saying that virus came out of a laboratory, when clearly that turned out to be the truth. People are being demonised just for using their eyes and ears and seeing what's going on around them. I find this absolutely harrowing.
It is so sinister, isn't it? I mean, firstly, what we have here are elected officials snitching on British citizens to these huge tech companies. That's essentially what's happening. They're telling Teacher, have you seen what this guy posted? Have you seen what that woman posted? Really sneaky, horrible behavior to try and get people censored or taken down. But then more fundamentally, you know, this is tyranny, really, because what we have is a situation where the government is imposing thousands upon thousands of migrants on local communities that they don't want. They don't want these young men from far away in their local hotels. They've made that very clear. So they're imposing people in these communities, and then they are preventing people from speaking honestly about it online. They're saying, well, you can't be too critical. You can't raise the political temperature. You can't say how opposed you are to these things. That's tyranny summed up, where firstly you foist on a people a policy they don't want, and then you forbid them from speaking freely about it. It's really disgusting.
It is absolutely disgusting. It is harrowing. It is terrifying. People feel like there is absolutely nothing they can do. It's amazing the amount of calls and messages that I get. In fact, I was doing a talk in Gloucester the other day, the city from whence I came, and most people in the audience were saying, what can we do? What on earth can we do? One thing that people do feel they can do is at least stand outside these hotels with placards, and most of them, to be fair, are actually urging other protesters to remain calm and remain peaceful. But the government aren't listening, are they? We've had protests in Epping Forest now for Lord knows how many weeks. The government aren't planning to shut that down. If they do, what they're going to do is disperse these men within the community or move them to a different hotel. They're not actually doing anything, it seems, to actually sort the problem, because they keep saying it's far too complex. And I want to know what you think is going to happen next.
You know, Alex, I think it might even be worse than you've just outlined very well there, which is that I don't think it's just a case that the government isn't listening to these people. The government hates these people. The government looks down its nose at the people, the kind of people who are protesting outside hotels. And anyone who's seen these protests or attended one of them will know that these are, in the vast majority, these are good, decent, mostly working class people who are worried for their kids, worried for their daughters, worried for their local communities. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about fascists. We're not talking about the far right. But in government, they are unquestionably looking down their noses at these people. They see them as the gammon. They see them as fascists. They see them as the scum of the earth. You know, what's your problem with having these exotic people from overseas? Why are you so horrible and xenophobic? That's what they think. So there's a real governmental contempt contempt for ordinary people's views and ordinary people's concerns. And that's where the censorship comes in as well. You know, the solution, I think, is fairly simple, which is that if someone comes to this country illegally, then they should be sent away. They should be deported because they've broken a fundamental law, which is that you can't cross a nation's borders without some form of permission. And you know who's really angry about illegal immigration? Legal migrants. Legal migrants in this country, which, by the way, includes my parents. I'm a first-generation Briton. My parents are from overseas. They're really angry about illegal migration because it's given immigration across the board a bad name, when in truth, there are many, many legal migrants in Britain who are contributing to this country and who love this country.
No, I absolutely agree. Although, like you said, that almost seems to be becoming a sort of extreme viewpoint now, because the whole sort of idea of immigration has been so murkied and muddied due to the unfettered amount of indiscriminate immigration we're getting, of people who actually mean us harm, that, like you said, it is creating a threat to all people here who have come from another country, and I think that is utterly despicable. What I want to understand, what a lot of the country seems to want to understand, is how on earth, when it's clear as day, shipping in a load of young men from countries that are frankly hostile to us and our way of life, putting them up at our expense is dangerous for us. It's not just grotesquely unfair that I'm about to hit the halfway point in my show, which means for the rest of the show I'm working to actually pay for someone who's probably going to want to sexually assault me to live the life of luxury without any contribution. Not only is it economically disastrous, but it is so socially dangerous, and people can see this because they're not idiots, they've got common sense. So how on earth is it that we get to the point that our politicians and our civil servants have such a niche and extreme viewpoint that they're the only people walking this planet who seem to think that this in some way is a good policy?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And I think it's because they just live on a different moral planet to the rest of us. They are so cut off from ordinary people and ordinary people's concerns. They're so removed from normal society that they can't even see the idiocy, the dangerous lunacy, in fact, of a policy like this, as you've just described it, which is that hundreds and hundreds of young men, often from very regressive cultures, are crossing over our borders every single day. In May, there was a Saturday in May when around 1,200 of these people came into Britain on small boats, and mostly men. We know that they're coming from cultures that don't respect women, that have lots of sexual hang-ups, which have backward beliefs. You know, Kemi Badenoch was right when she said not all cultures are equally valid. That used to be an acceptable view. Now apparently it's racist. That's where they're coming from. And they're coming to a country that doesn't even try to integrate them, which says, come along, do your own thing. We'll give you 3 meals a day and a nice hotel room. This is a recipe for disaster. And that's why those people are on those streets, not because they're xenophobic, not because they're racist, not because they're dumb, but because they can see what the government can't, which is that this is a dangerous, lunatic policy that will have detrimental consequences for our society.
But not only is it not trying to integrate them, it seems to me they're actively beatified at the expense of us. It's crazy. But do you think this is a very interesting policy here? Because I'm beginning to think actually this could sort of work, which is that the government are going to restrict civil service internships to students from poorer families as part of a drive from ministers to make Whitehall more working class. Because the fact of the matter is this, actually, part of the common denominator of people who seem to go around thinking that men from other countries being put up in 4-star hotels, full board and with PlayStations and mobile phones is a good idea, are posh people, are the comfortable middle classes, people who've never had to work and strive, people who have very little purpose in life. They've lived such sheltered and protected backgrounds that they want to give themselves purpose and meaning by waving their banners or having this sort of viewpoint that isn't the world such a cuddly, lovely place and sound popular at their dinner parties, where the working classes who set their alarms at 6 in the morning have to fight and strive for every penny that they earn are also the ones most exposed to reality. So it's not a bad idea, actually, to have a scheme to get more of those people running the country than actually looking at everything through the prism of race and sexuality.
I could not agree with that more, you know, because what you can really see outside these hotels is that it's, people say there's a civil war coming. You know, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but I tell you what there is. there's a kind of unspoken class war taking place on the streets of this country. Because if you look at the people protesting against out-of-control migration, they are predominantly from the working classes or some, lower middle-class people, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way at all. And then if you look at the counter-protesters who are saying, migrants are welcome here, go away, you racist scum, they are largely from the middle-class left. These are the graduate classes who, as you say, derive this sense of virtue and purpose through being pro-migration and not having to think about the destructive impact that lots of new arrivals can have on a small community. So it's absolutely a massive class divide. And I think that is one of the most interesting things about this. The upper classes and the middle classes benefit from the arrival of all this cheap labor because it means that they might have someone who can look after their kids while they go off to work, or who can deliver their fancy meals at night. The delivery drivers, they like to have this servant class that works mostly to the benefit of middle class people or people with money. But working class people see these arrivals as competition because they undercut wages. They often take jobs that people in this country could be doing. So there is unquestionably a massive class tension on this issue. And if we get more ordinary working class men and women into the civil service, that might just shift things in a good direction.
Now, before you go, Brendan, I want to ask you about another big divisive political topic of our age, which is Israel, Hamas, Gaza, the lot of it. It's no one cares, quite frankly, how many people are slaughtered and dishomed in Sudan. No, we've got to focus on Israel and Hamas, don't we? But do you think at this point that it seems to me the needle's moving somewhat, other than Donald Trump, certainly in this country? Even Donald Trump's actually beginning to sort of look at Netanyahu and say, mate, you've gone a bit too far. Are we sort of clinging on because we want to support Israel, because we believe that they're doing a great job in fighting terrorism, when we've become all too lily-livered and virtue signalling to actually have this conversation, that actually we're not acknowledging that there is a bit of a disaster taking place in Gaza? Or is this on the other side, what other people say, and I don't know which way to think, that it's all propaganda being pumped out by Hamas and there isn't a humanitarian crisis?
There is a crisis, no question about it. I think there is great suffering in Gaza. Loads of civilians have died, and also lots of Hamas militants have been killed. They're never included in the numbers that we hear about. And there is hunger, and there is possibly starvation as well. There is certainly a food crisis. That's all true. I want the war to end more than anyone. But the idea that Israel could just lay down arms right now and everything will be fine is just a pipe dream. Hamas is still there. Hamas is still fighting. Hamas is still a threat to Israel, and I would say to the West. This is a civilizational clash. And just think about this fact, Alex, which is in the papers today. In Britain in 2024, not one family called their baby boy Keir, but 583 families named their baby boy Yahya. Mm-hmm. Presumably, some of that was in response to Yahya Sinwar, who, of course, was the leader of Hamas, the architect of the worst mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust, and he was killed by Israel last year. So we can presume some families named their boys after him because he was supposedly martyred. That's a serious crisis, and that's where we can see that this conflict overseas impacts on us. And if we don't do something about it, we're in big trouble.
Brendan, you're brilliant. I love you to your bones. Keep doing what you do. You're one of the best people out there. Mr. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online. Now, don't go anywhere, because coming up after the break, you might have noticed there's a lot of flights that have been grounded over the past few days because something went wrong with the computer systems of air traffic controllers again. And then it turns out that a lot of people in that industry are working from home in order that it may reach net zero. Planes in the sky, net zero. Make it make sense. We're going to be speaking to Ben Pyle, who's a co-founder of Climate Debates UK, on that topic after this.
There's a new button on Google, which, you know, for tech people like me is pretty exciting, and hopefully exciting for watchers, listeners as well at home. But there's a new AI button. So when you go to Google this week, you might start seeing this button. It should be with all Brits at the end of the week, and it basically turns your Google search into kind of like a chatbot. So Google's saying that it will let you ask questions that you were never able to ask before. So instead of searching for, say, best holidays and then looking for hotels and then looking for restaurants, you'll be able to wrap it all into a single search, hit the AI button, and it'll just do it for you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, like I said, if you were flying somewhere over the last few days, you might have discovered that, quite frankly, you couldn't. Or at least it's taking you quite a while to get to your approved destination. Because there was something that went very funny with air traffic control. Again, I don't know, someone tried to refresh the antiviral software or something and it crashed the whole system. Yet it turns out that the air traffic control company responsible for Britain's skies has been embracing home working because it wants to go green. That's right, they're controlling carbon chugging planes in the sky, but no, we've got to hit net zero by staying at home under our blankets. Many staff at National Air Traffic Services have been allowed to work remotely. Managers decided it would help the organisation reduce its carbon footprints, cut car journeys to reach net zero by 2035. They call it, like all things in life, it's always got some fancy nomenclature, doesn't it? Irregular migration. It's called agile working. Agile working? I'm sorry, what is so agile about sitting on one sofa doing their job and not actually leaving their house to go to an office where they might actually be able to detect a problem before it happens? Let's speak now to Ben Pyle, co-founder of Climate Debate UK. I mean, the working from home thing, I get a lot of people do it. I kind of, you know, if it was me in that situation, I probably would quite enjoy it, quite frankly. But it makes a mockery, quite frankly, of when things go wrong and you wonder if they had been present in the office, if they'd been sitting around having meetings that weren't via Zoom, where you can sort of sit there and clock out, or, you know, oh, I haven't got my camera on right now because I'm afraid my house is a bit of a mess, or my bandwidth isn't big enough, so I'm just going to do audio only, where you just sort of, you know, walk away from your computer screen and go do your laundry instead. It's not agile working. It's the opposite, isn't it? And how on earth is this supposed to suddenly make Britain net zero? It makes us net zero productive.
Yeah, you'd think that something as important as this critical infrastructure that manages these lumps of metal that fly over our heads 24/7 would want to be kind of centralized and kind of locked down in a very secure environment. I mean, that's, I think they did deny that this may have been Russian hackers or whether you know, attack of that kind. But if you start letting all of your staff work from home, as you say, under their, was it slankets? That's a new one on me, as is agile working, actually. But if you start letting people sort of sit there, have coffee and, you know, maybe have a late bath and wear their slippers, then you have a very different corporate culture, and you expose that whole operation to a great many more risks. Not just from you know, malign attacks, you know, people trying to disrupt that infrastructure, but you just create many more points of failure. Someone, you know, is not getting out of that bath or what have you. Now, to your question though, like, why is this happening and how is this going to reduce carbon emissions? Well, I mean, they say that people not driving to work, or perhaps even not using the train, is going to reduce CO2 emissions. Now that just seems like a very remarkable thing for a company that manages aviation to say, because, you know, but by the time a couple of planes have taken off, all of that carbon that they've mitigated has been spewed out by a couple of passenger jets.
Does it even mitigate carbon though? Because I'm sitting here thinking, I remember back in the day when you know, phone up British Gas and sort out your tariff. You know, it's like if you're not going to be home between these hours, or if you're only putting on your washing machine at 8 o'clock at night, you get a cheaper tariff because you're not chugging out electricity and energy all day long. And you'd think that actually by the time people get to the office and you got 50 of them in one room using the same lights and using the same electricity, that might be a bit better than everybody with their tellies on and their washing machines going and cooking their dinner on their ovens and doing, you know, having their laptops charging at the same time, all in their own houses around the country. To me, that probably uses more energy than everybody collected together in the same building.
But if you look at the NATS website and you go to the bottom, you'll see a list of partners of NATS. And these are organizations that develop what used to be called corporate social responsibility is now called ESG. So they develop the programs that, you know, that companies, corporations use to signal their virtue, essentially. But it goes much further than signaling virtue. These are plans, these are schemes that company must bring into its business plan and its business operations. And I'll list a few of them if you don't mind. One is the FT Climate Leaders Program. One is the Carbon Disclosure Project. One is the Science-Based Targets Scheme. And one is the Prince's Responsible Business Network. And another, I mean, just to give you an indication, if those aren't already, is Stonewall. So these are organizations that come in and they oversee the human resources policies of that company. And one of those is, of course, is that now corporations that are signed up to ESG schemes have to incorporate emissions reduction into their business plans. It's not state regulation, but there are punishments, because if for companies that don't incorporate ESG, because if another company, for example, a bank or a financial institution, let's say, expects its customers and its supply chains to be ESG compliant, then a company like NATS may find that it cannot obtain financial services. It might even get debanked. Wow. Right. So I'll read you, if you don't mind, I'll read you the NATS statement about its 5-year carbon emissions reduction plan. It says, "We are in a climate emergency and catastrophic climate change will happen if decisive action is not delivered in this decade. This means action is required across everything we do. It is embedded in our company strategy as our plan to deliver one of our four long-term objectives to 2040. Now, that's just an amazingly absurd thing for an aviation company to say, because the only thing that such a company with such a belief can really do is close down their operations. Also, that's the only way.
This sort of hyperbole, we're in a climate emergency, we must take drastic action. I'm looking outside the window right now and I don't see a climate emergency. In fact, I've not seen one anywhere. The only emergency I've seen is tectonic plates moving that might have caused a tsunami. That's more likely to put a Pacific island underwater than Mrs. Miggins sitting at home and boiling a blimmin' kettle. And it's just, you know, the people now have sort of got to this and gone, this is just a load of rubbish, isn't it? We've been told for decades now that, you know, Pakistan's going to be underwater, or there'll be no Papua New Guinea or something, or by, you know, particular dates we're going to have such horrible wildfires and monsoons and this, that and the other, that the world will literally be unrecognisable. And as far as I can tell, it ain't happening.
Yeah, I think we need to look at these forces, those kind of ideas and these kind of organizations and the pressure they are putting on companies and other agencies, state agencies, public services, to deliver on agendas that the public are really not signed up to, and probably really there isn't really much scientific evidence for. One of the examples I'd use for that, for example, with the case of ESG and all of this DEI and all this three-letter acronym stuff, is Birmingham. And we know that Birmingham's quite noble attempt to deliver equality ended up bankrupting Birmingham Council, because they then had to retrospectively pay people who were seemingly discriminated against because they weren't paid the same as bin men. Now, it's the same with NATS. Either NATS is a private company that delivers a service to the British public via, after being given a monopoly by the British government, or or it's an NGO, or it's a green NGO.
I think
right?
it's just a green NGO, isn't it? And we all know what they do, which is absolutely nothing apart from making our lives an economic misery. Ben Pyle, thank you ever so much, co-founder of Climate Debate UK. I'm going to be taking a short break now, but that's 1 hour done. There's still 2 more to go, so don't go anywhere. I'll be back on the other side of these short commercials.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Have you got a nice steaming brew in front of you? I hope so. I'll tell you what, this is empty. Been a glitch in the system somewhere in Talk Towers, I'll tell you that much. But there hasn't been a glitch in the system when it comes to the guests, because I'm joined in the studio by the wonderful Myron Senton-Nathan. Welcome back. Haven't
Good
seen
to
you
be
for
back.
a while.
Yeah,
How are you?
it's been a while. This seat, it feels, I don't know, it feels like home now.
Does it feel like home? You sit there in the throne of truth because we're going to be bombarding it. It's a bit like the sort of mastermind seat.
Right.
I'm going to ask you all sorts of questions. I'm going to
I'm
make
the
you
David Lammy
squirm.
of Talk TV.
You better not be.
Okay.
You better not be. I want facts and I want precision. I want honesty.
Okay.
Things that I'm not
You'll
sure
get
Mr.
honesty.
Lammy.
You'll get honesty.
Things I'm not sure Mr. Lammy fully understand. Also, you're my kind of like, you know, you give me diplomatic immunity because I want to moan about foreigners in this country.
Okay, so my diversity body armour type thing.
You're my checkbox champion.
Okay, good. Right, diversity. Hi, I'd like to be part of it.
Exactly. You are it.
I don't believe in meritocracy anyway, so.
Yeah, you wouldn't be here if there was meritocracy, Myron. You'd be back of the queue. No, you really wouldn't, because we love Myron and we love how outspoken you are. Now, here we go again. Empirical evidence of the fact that a load of people have come into this country from abroad and they're committing crimes at a far higher rate than the domestic-born population. We've got statistics. It backs up everything that we suspected, everything we knew anyway. And we're not talking about the pickpocketing, although that is, I think, largely perpetrated by foreign gangs and the like as well. We're talking about extremely serious offences. A number of foreigners in prisons for serious violent sexual and theft offences has surged over the past year alone. Official data published for the first time. Finally, we get to have some statistics. 1,731 foreign criminals in prison are in prison for sex offences. 1 in 8 of them, sex offences. 10% of all sex offenders in prisons. Now, yes, you could turn around and say, oh, well, 90% of rapes and sex offences are therefore committed by Brits. Number one, I'd say this, with these statistics, when you say Brits, it doesn't slice and dice the culture of people who are now considered British, but also it's a massive overrepresentation.
Yeah, if something's disproportionately represented in a certain ethnic minority, it means there is a systemic problem in that ethnic minority. We just need to make that very, very clear. I'm Sri Lankan Tamil, right? So I remember when I was growing up, there was a little bit of a problem, it seemed like, I don't know the statistics, but of credit card fraud amongst sort of Tamil gangs in sort of like Tooting and Wimbledon, places like that. I reckon there might have been a disproportionate amount of Tamils involved in credit card fraud at that time. I don't know if that's the case now. If that's the case, it means there's a systemic problem in the Tamil community, my community, with credit card fraud. Now, we need to extrapolate that principle across the board with all ethnic minorities when it comes to sexual crime, when it comes to the grooming gangs. If there are a predominantly or disproportionate amount of Pakistanis involved in this clannish group child sex offences against white working class girls, it means there is a systemic problem there. In that ethnic minority. Afghans, 22 times more likely to commit sexual crime. There is a systemic problem amongst Afghans. We must start talking like this, because if we have a mass immigration policy, this experiment, you're going to have awkward conversations. It's inevitable.
But it comes down to this as well. You know, you spoke about sort of credit card fraud there and Tamil gangs, and also we went through a period where a lot of credit card fraud was being perpetrated by Eastern European gangs a few years ago. A lot of cannabis is being grown by the Vietnamese. This is largely because a particular gang with their compatriots find a gap in the market, bring all their mates over to make a load of money, and so therefore when people are being arrested, they're all from the same country because they're all in it together. But that doesn't necessarily reflect a cultural or societal difference. When it comes to sexual offences, it's slightly different, isn't it? Because what to me that exposes is a mindset, an upbringing, a way of thinking, an inbuilt ideology, an appetite, or a morality that is skewed and not the same as ours.
So, Alex, you're pointing at something. I'm just going to actually just bring it out the woodwork. What's the age of consent in Iraq?
Yeah, it's about 9, isn't it?
It's about 9 years old. Where has that come from?
The Quran.
It's come from the
Hadith. I don't know.
It's come from Muslim sources. I mean, you know, Aisha is the one, you know, the Prophet's wife is commonly quoted in Bukhari as being of 9 years old when she was married. Now, you can say that's 7th century Arabia, and I think the age of consent in England in like the 10th century was something like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. So, you know, things have moved on. If you're a liberal Muslim, you will look at that and say, that's 7th century Arabia, we're in 2025, it doesn't apply now, new laws apply. We have to reinterpret and understand things differently. If you're an Islamist or a very conservative Muslim, you will look at these things and start saying, no, if the Prophet did it in the 7th century Arabia, it should be applied to 2025 because everything the Prophet did was perfect and we can't look to sanitize it in light of liberal Western values. And that is the conflict within the Muslim world. I don't know what is the right Islam. It's not for me to say. I'm not a Muslim. But we as British citizens should say this is the right Islam that we should have for this country. And I've long said we do not need a definition of Islamophobia because we have the right laws in place to protect decent Muslims who love this country. What we need is an Islamist definition, actually theologically worked out from the interpretation of the Muslim sources, say ring-fenced it out, create a firewall between liberal Islam and the Islamist ideology and say we do not want this part in our country and this is absolutely fine. That's what needs to happen going forward. Angela Rayner doesn't understand any of this.
Don't understand nothing, that woman. The thing is about the whole concept of Islamophobia is you're basically telling people to not pattern seek, aren't you? Because at the end of the day, am I scared of Islam? Yes. Is that my fault? No. I'm scared of Islam, frankly, because they have been the common denominator of terrorist attacks in the Western world in recent years and indeed in their own countries and further afield. I'm scared of it because there has been this common denominator, like you said, with grooming gangs. I'm scared of it because when it comes to the overrepresentation of sexual offences, it seems to be men from countries who have what I consider to be very backwards attitudes towards women, because in this country we don't stone women to death or make them cover up their ankles and their heads. And so that is why I am scared of it. And someone telling me you're not not allowed to be scared of that. That is a crime. It's completely contrary to sort of innate human biology. Of course I'm going to be scared of it. I'm a woman.
Yeah, no, what? This is an ideology we're talking about. You know, you can criticise communism, capitalism, and you can criticise Islam. Then people might say, hold on a minute, what about anti-Semitism? You know, we've got a definition of anti-Semitism, what we should have Islamophobia. The Jewish situation is different because it is an ethnicity as well as a religious belief system as well. So you can be a non-believing Jew, but you cannot be a non-believing Muslim, right? And that's the difference here. So that's why the Islamophobia definition is completely redundant, and all it will do is suppress free speech, create more suspicion, create more frustration. Exactly what they're doing now. I mean, we've got this kind of a spy network now trying to...
Let's talk about that, because that is really chilling. I mean, look, it's not like it's brand new information to us. We saw this during COVID. We saw posts being censored. And the problem that we have as society, look, part of me, and I hate saying this out loud, but part of me thinks when you're about to run into some sort of mad insurrection, which we're on the cusp of, and that is entirely the government's fault. They've left people with no choice because they've done nothing about the most severe pressing issues of our age. But part of me thinks it's better to try and stop people going tonto than just pretending that that's not going to happen. The best way of doing that, of course, is listening to people and actually dealing with the emergency in your country. But what is so harrowing is they don't seem to be doing that, and the way that they want to approach people with perfectly valid concerns about what they can see happening in front of them. I had Brendan O'Neill on earlier, and he's saying it's tyranny. It's tyranny, actually, when you're actually oppressing people, when you're doing things to them, and then you're actually preventing them talking about it. It is malign, it is pure evil, it is wicked, as far as I'm concerned. We saw this during COVID, and a lot of the stuff they silenced during COVID and demonised, whether people said, what about actually if we let this virus spread among the healthy people of this country who are unlikely to die, that might actually be a bit better than destroying the economy. You monster, you want to kill your granny, you're evil. It might be that this very complex virus, this newfangled creation that seems to have come out of a wet market right next to a virology lab, could have come out of the virology lab. No, that is xenophobic. You're a conspiracy theorist. The problem is, what we have learned is when they're trying to shut us up, it's because we're actually right on it. We're close to the truth.
Yeah. Look, what's happening here with the Labour government? Diane Abbott had made a really good point. She said Keir Starmer hasn't got a feel for politics, right? He's effectively been parachuted in, and he hasn't actually had to deal with people. He's very awkward amongst the British public, but very comfortable snuggling up to Ursula von der Leyen. That's his position. So when you don't have a feel for politics, you don't understand the policies, you don't know how to fix things. So when things go against the grain, when things start falling apart, you get frustrated, and then you get more authoritarian. To keep things together, you have to get more authoritarian. Labour have a problem in that they have a hardware problem. They are ideologically possessed in the wrong direction. And what's happening at the moment is reality is confronting their ideology, and it's starting to rupture. It's starting to rupture on three fronts. The first front is the civil unrest that we're starting to see across the country with the migrant hotels. The second thing that's starting to rupture is the economy, with the IMF firing and warning signs, basically to Rachel Reeves saying, get your act together, otherwise it's going to be a sovereign debt crisis. And finally, politically, he's losing control of his backbenchers, with Corbyn on the left, Farage on the right, and just this whole disgruntled situation. He can't cut state spending. So Keir Starmer is literally losing control of the country. I will repeat that again. He is losing control of this country as we speak, and hence you're going to start seeing more authoritarian measures to make up for his absolute loss of control.
Well, this is the other thing, because everything the Labour Party seem to be doing is contrary to common sense and what they need to do. And you brought up a little bit there the IMF and our crisis when it comes to our economy. And good old Donald, when he came to open his latest golf course, basically said to Sir Keir Starmer, the windmills you're sticking up everywhere ain't going to work, sunshine. They're ugly.
So bad. So bad.
But do you know what? It's the first time in my life that I want to say I'm jealous that I'm not in the EU anymore, because he's bullied the EU and said, you're going to buy our gas. Instead. And what we found out today is because stupid Ed Zero has banned all sort of oil and gas in the North Sea, he's now having to import more of it than ever before. Our energy prices are through the roof. Listen to the Donald. Donald said, you are sitting on a gold mine of prosperity. You can become energy self-sufficient. You can become an energy exporter. Think of the geopolitical clout that gives you. Instead, not only are we going to end up subservient to wacky nations who hate us and pay through the roof for the privilege. This is all an act of self-harm.
Yeah, I mean, when Trump comes in on the scene and JD Vance, I feel like they're like hostage negotiators. I feel like we are being held hostage to our government. They're coming in, sort of trying to negotiate with Keir Starmer a way out of the situation. And so, yeah, I mean, how awkward was it? Keir Starmer, the globalist, the international law-loving individual, and then Trump, then the nation state, the America first. These are two worlds colliding. And he was giving them a playbook. He's basically saying cheap energy, low tax, law and order, and immigration. That's it. You finish, you get those things right, you'll get re-elected, which is complete antithesis of what...
And you'll save your blimmin' country, and that's what America wants to see. It wants to see us prosper. And I'm slightly disappointed that he wasn't playing the tariff game with us. I mean, look, I don't want our economy to be destroyed because we're actually in a trade deficit with America. We sell more to them than we buy from them, which is why he's being quite gentle on us. But he's actually used tariffs in a very strategic way when it comes to, we want you to sign up to free speech. We want you to get rid of the mad self-harm of net zero. We want you to actually control your borders because all of this stuff is destroying Western civilization, of which you are the fact. And he hasn't done that with us.
No, I mean, what Trump represents is he will throw the status quo out of the window, the rule book out of the window, and he will just go for pure strength and conviction. Now, if we can somehow smuggle in 25,000 odd Afghans plus dependents secretly with super injunctions, that's one of the biggest amazing events a government has had to pull off, I think, in modern history, right? If you can do that, you can deport millions of illegal immigrants in this country. I believe the state can do that. You know, we've had Keir Starmer recognise Palestine as a state. Apparently, according to international law, it violates international law. It has no real borders, no stable government that can deal with foreign affairs.
Oh, international
so it's
law.
Not really, but what does Lord Hermer do, who is wedded to international law, apparently? He starts reinterpreting the international law. It's actually, it is actually fine to label Palestine a state. What does that show you? It shows you what Suella Braverman said before, that as an Attorney General, you can reinterpret international law in line with the successes of this country and what the needs of this country. So international law, this myth, this joke of international law that we can't deport or turn back the boats or whatever it is, it requires strength and conviction to bulldoze our way through that. That's what Trump represents. That's the leader we need going forward.
The problem is with our political class is they've dined out on all of these leftist ideologies. It's helped them get where they are. It's what gives them a sense of purpose and morality and conviction and power. It's what they've bowed down to and martyred themselves in front of the altar of for all of their lives. So expecting them now to suddenly go, oh, look, now it's under the spotlight and is being put into practice. It is found wanting. It is not in the national interest. It's very hard to persuade these people to let go of that madness, the mad sort of Marxism of their youth.
There's a kind of religiosity to people like Lord Hermer. They see international law as divine law. They see themselves as the high priest. And if you look at Jess Phillips, when she's confronted with the obvious situation statistics with the Pakistani rape gangs, what does she do? And when she's asked about it, she pivots to toxic masculinity.
Oh, it's men.
She can't say it. This is a mental dysfunction. This is
cognitive dissonance.
This is a clinical dysfunctionality of astronomical proportions that is actually affecting the safety of women and girls and the whole integrity of this country.
It does make you wonder how on earth we've got so many brainwashed nutters now running the country and in our civil service. On that note, actually, there's been a suggestion that Whitehall needs to sort of make huge efforts now to get people from the working classes in our civil service. I actually say, for once in my life, good on you. I think that is the correct route to take, because the problem is we've packed through all of the organisations that hold the levers of power with a small minority of people with actually very extreme views.
Yeah, I mean, it's an echo chamber. There's groupthink, there's activist judges. It would be a good idea. It's like DEI in reverse somehow, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So they're actively going to pick, probably, hopefully, white working class. Why not? Because they seem to be doing not so well in the education system. Give them a helping hand. We need difference of opinion. We need the ordinary person. We need those people protesting outside the migrant hotels, those women, those worried about their families, their daughters. Their opinion needs to be in Whitehall, front and centre. And I think that's the problem. They're simply dismissed as nuisances. I think Brendan O'Neill said that the government looks upon them with contempt.
Yeah.
It looks at them as gammons, people just to brush aside, annoyances. And that's where you see the censorship coming from before.
Myron, it's been fantastic having you in the studio. Wow, we've rattled around a load of points, haven't we? There's not much that we didn't touch there. That was really quite invigorating. If you want to have the same feeling that I've got by being in the studio of Myra, and you can join me in the studio after the break because we're going to be taking some of your calls. 03444991000 is the number to dial if you'd like to have a chat. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to text me instead. If you're going to do that, you've got to write talk before your message. Going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because in the democratic home of conversation, Talk Towers, it's your opportunity to throw in your 2-bit just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Let's do some messages. Craig in Sunderland says, how can they let air traffic controllers work from home? Surely a safety critical post like that should be centrally monitored. After all, how do they know the controller isn't sitting working from home with a hangover? Well, the thing is, Craig, actually, when it comes to this, the air traffic controllers themselves still have to be in the tower, OK? They're not quite replaced by the AI robots yet, but all the other people who do the admin around that post are allowed to work from home. And I don't know really what's gone on with the failure of air traffic control over the last couple of years, but my hunch is that it's something to do with the IT again. So if you're Derek, who works in IT, who's supposed to make sure that the latest version of Microsoft or something has been properly downloaded and the antiviral software is efficient, it might help if you were in the office fiddling about with the computer networks and not sitting there with one of those sort of mouse movement detectors while sitting on the sofa watching Cash in the Attic. Not even sure if Cash in the Attic is still on telly, to be honest. What is it these days? Homes Under the Hammer, something like that. Tanya in London says, morning, Alex. I've got a new bumper sticker. I love CO2. I'm waiting for my car to get keyed. I love that. Now, I love the fact you messaged me that, Tanya, because I said the other day I did a little talk in Gloucester to the right-minded folk of the city of my birth, and I met a woman called Louise who actually makes anti-woke bumper stickers, and she gave me some. They're brilliant. She's on Etsy. Virtue Signal Blocker is her trade name on Etsy. She said, oh, you'd never guess, all this Etsy lot is dominated by the left. The left have created an industry out of wokery. They make so much money on their virtue signalling, so I'm doing the opposite. And I'm going to show you some of her bumper stickers because they're hilarious. She's got this one of Sadiq Khan saying, I'm not a fan of your mayor. I think he's done a terrible job, the mayor of London. He's a nasty person, quoting Donald J. Trump. I dare you to put that on your car and drive through ULEZ. And this one's brilliant. So Keir Starmer, pin the U-turn on the politician. Brilliant stuff. Anyway, there she is, Louise, Virtue Signal Blocker on Etsy. We love to see it. Hi, Alex. Not sure that anyone has said this before. Ooh, what's it going to be? But as long as we have planes flying in and out of this country, we can never get to net zero unless they invent an electric plane. And I don't know about you, but there is no way I'd even get on a plane that is electric. Love your show, by the way, says Simon in Nottingham. I tell you what, I was at Fairford Air Show not long ago, and the Red Arrows now run on biofuel. That's right, cooking fat and stuff like that, a bit like King Charles. Doesn't he have some sort of like Aston Martin that runs on old red wine? That is cool. I want one of those. Dan from Walthamstow says, as the Conservatives, Labour and France will not stop allowing the massive influx of illegal immigration into the UK, then surely they are complicit in their actions and are actually being part of the gangs that Starmer's supposed to be smashing. That's so true, isn't it? This is why they have to call it irregular migration and not illegal migration, because the UK Border Force, which are paid by the taxpayer and acting on behest of the government, are the ones actually bringing them into the country. So actually, Sir Keir Starmer is pretty much the ringleader of the very gang he's supposed to be smashing. I love that point. That is brilliantly made. Let's do some calls now and speak to John, who is in Bradford. Good morning, John.
Good morning. How are you?
Hi there, John.
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right,
Hello?
John, lad, we got you. Not sure we can hear John. I'm not sure where John has gone. John is AWOL in Bradford. Let's try Stephen in Manchester instead. Hi, Stephen.
Oh, hello. Good morning.
What is this? The curse of the silent call?
No, I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Yes, hello?
Oh, is it my earphone? It's my earphone that's gone wonky. That's what's going. I couldn't hear anyone because my own technology had become diswired, if you will. Sorry about that. Well, that's what happens when you're doing live television. They're all like waving at me through the glass of the gallery anyway. Listen, while we sort out all of the wirings, let's take a short advert break while I can reconfigure my setup. So don't go anywhere. I'm back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know what? Part of the job when you sit there in the studio doing live stuff is at some point you're going to look like an absolute bonehead, aren't you? Which is pretty much what happened to me before the break, because I'm there going, why can't I hear the callers? Hello, hello. And everyone in the gallery is there doing some sort of coordinated Mexican wave at me. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And it's actually just because my earpiece had become unplugged from the socket. So everyone watching and listening was like, they can hear you. It was like being in some sort of pantomime, no doubt, where I am the clown. Anyway, thankfully, I've managed to figure out what was going on, and so now I can actually speak to people without looking like a moron. So let's begin with John in Bradford. Hi there, John. Sorry for that.
Right, can you hear me now?
I really can. It was all my fault. All my wires become dislodged here in Cape Canaveral, but they're plugged back into the right spots.
Well, what I want to say to you is that I worked for a local authority for many, many years. And one of the charges that can be brought against an individual is a waste of public funds. Now, although you can't take that action against a government, you can take it against an individual in that government, and it requires certain conditions when you're negotiating contracts to make sure you get the best value. And there's a whole list of things: financial sanctions, procurement regulations, a committee on public accounts, civil servants regulations, professional standards. It all covers various things that governments do, and I can't understand why nobody's taken these individuals to court. Ed Miliband would be a typical example.
I was just thinking him, actually. I was thinking he's a walking waste of public funds, isn't he?
That's right. I mean, if you follow the money there, I'm sure there's something that's not quite right. Well, if individuals can be taken to court for wasting public funds, why nobody's done it?
Do you know, that's a really... People keep saying, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do as a nation to try and get things sorted? The government aren't listening. Perhaps we all should get together in one giant crowd-funded legal challenge against Sir Keir Starmer and say your entire cabinet is a waste of public funds. Your Home Secretary is a waste of public funds, putting people in hotels when they've broken into the country. Your net zero idiot Ed is a waste of public funds because we can't afford to pay our energy bills when we sit on a load of gas and oil. This would be quite a good approach, wouldn't it? Very British.
Yeah, I'll tell you something else as well. I mean, I'll probably get rated for this, but if what they're doing with immigration, with these illegal immigrants, if you were doing this in another country, right, you would be slated. You would be saying you're ethnic cleansing.
Right. So, yeah, well, you're sort of like, you're harming your population in your own country by importing a load of people from other countries.
That's right. And that, if you did that in any other country, you'd be accused of ethnic cleansing.
But yeah, I'm not sure ethnic cleansing is quite the terminology, but most other countries certainly don't go about providing 4-star hotel accommodation full board for people who've broken in, that's for certain, because it's a mad concept. John, thank you ever so much for your call. I do like the idea of waste of public funds, a sort of joint legal venture against the cabinet for not spending our taxpayers' money in the way that we expect them to. Let's speak now to Stephen, who is in Manchester. Hi, Stephen.
Oh, hello there. Good morning.
Good morning.
Right. I've got a couple of things to say to you on the demographic crisis that we're facing at the moment. The first one, I'd like to quote Rudyard Kipling, because we've had warnings about this sort of thing all the way through the centuries. This disaster that we're facing into now, to wit, obliteration of the nation, is not a new thing in history. Kipling wrote, "The stranger within thy gate, he may seem good or kind, but you cannot read his soul, you cannot feel his mind, nor know when the gods of his far-off land may repossess his blood." And we are letting in on an epic scale, as we frequently say, fighting age, as it were, muscular young men in droves who often mean Western culture harm. We must be quite mad as a nation to be doing this. But if you read I don't know if you ever have read John Baggett's Glubb, The Fate of Empires. He looks at the phase of the imperial progression and says at the end phase of the imperial progression, this is what happens. A nation becomes flaccid, feminine, and weak, and it loses its veracity, its strength, and across its borders come new waves of young men determined to take for their culture and their identity, and the rest is history. And unless we wake up yesterday and we put somebody, and I think it's going to be Nigel Farage, in charge, if the British people don't awake to this, it's over for this great country. And the other thing I would say is that where demographics are concerned, over the last, since the 1967 Abortion Act,
right,
killed out over 10 million would-be citizens. We're not breeding our kind, and those that are coming in are showing great...
Well, I mean, these are multiple things to unpack here, Stephen. You are right on the demographic change and the fact that we rely too heavily on immigration. We're not having our own children enough. That's a massive issue we need to address and get to the bottom of. Can I just say, I do like the name John Baggett's Glubb. What a brilliant name that is. I'm going to research that. But I think I come to mind of a particular quote, which is Ronald Reagan, far more recent, although I don't know when John Baggett's Glubb wrote his seminal text. His name sounds like it probably wasn't recent. Are there any other Baggett Glubbs out there? If you are, do get in touch. But Reagan said it's better to be feared than to be loved. Power through might. And that, I think, is a very important lesson that our political class needs to learn. We don't need the whole world going, aren't they so kind, the British? Aren't they so lovely? Aren't they so gentle? Aren't they so giving and generous? No, we want them to say, blimey, those Brits can stand on their own 2 feet and look after their own. We better treat them with respect. Stephen, thank you ever so much. Let's throw down, I was going to throw down a little voice note there, but I don't know if I've got it. We're going to speak to Norman. Everything's gone funny ever since my earpiece fell out. I've lost track of time and lost track of my organisation, but never you mind. We're going to seize it back. Going to seize back control, which is apparently what Yvette Cooper is saying she's going to do with our streets, because she is celebrating the fact that, guess what? Knife crime has dropped by 6%. Yeah, I know. That's what I thought as well. Really turning the corner there, Yvette. But don't you worry. They've banned ninja swords because that's what everyone was using on the streets as they're going about stabbing each other. It's just ninja swords. No other weapons will do. Let's speak to Norman Brennan, former police officer and campaigner against knife crime. I mean, the government are doing what they normally do, which is sort of telling us that there's this amazing success story, that they've really got a hold of this problem, that we can all sleep soundly in our beds if we live in London or, quite frankly, anywhere else, because they have got all sorts of things, such as a 2-step verification for knives bought from online retailers, a £60,000 penalty for social media companies who ignore orders to remove content that glorifies knives within 48 hours. I mean, that's all very well, but this is just messing about around the edges, isn't it? It's not actually getting to the root cause of the problem, and I don't know how much of an impact this is going to have.
No, I completely agree. I'd like to see these statistics in relation to the 6%. I think that might be in certain areas. It's quite convenient that it's a bit like statistics, damn statistics and lies, and mix all that about, and you're still confused. Knife crime is at an epidemic level, and as you rightly say, this government, when they came in, promised to reduce knife crime by 50% in 10 years. I don't know where they got it from. They just make up things on the spot. But I don't see how that's going to happen. And when it comes to knife crime, it nowhere hits anywhere near the true figures. There are 4,000 gangs in Britain, 4,000, normally 30 strong, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. Almost all of those will have a knife. None of those statistics are actually included in the figures of the Home Office because they don't know about it. And the reason they don't know about it, Alex, is we've got no police on the streets. We don't carry out stop and search like we used to do. Now, when you look at these figures, just imagine if the figures were as they were back in 2000, in the last 5-7 years. The Met, for example, carried out, I think 3 or 4 years ago, 1.5 million stop and searches. Last year, that was down to 500,000.
So
this year, it will be even lower.
So what? I mean, to me, I mean, that is surely, like you say, at the crux of all of this. If you want people to not carry out knife attacks, they need to be not carrying knives, which means that people need to be checked whether they've got an offensive weapon. And if they do, we got to come down on them like a ton of bricks. And yet that is reducing by 75% or thereabouts.
As I've told you before and many others, when I was a serving police officer, I went to 10 Downing Street with families, both black and white, in London, who had been bereaved by homicide. It was 20 years ago. In full uniform, I was outside number 10. Unheard of that a police officer puts his uniform on and feels so strong about a subject such as knife crime that risks his career to highlight it. And I told the government then, and it was a Labour government, unless you get a grip on knife crime, there will be an epidemic. Well, there is an epidemic. And as you rightly say, the government are dealing with froth. They're not dealing with the substance. And the substance, just briefly, Alex, is this. 5 years mandatory prison sentences for carrying a knife on the street without lawful authority or excuse. 3 years if you're a child. Mass stop and search. Well, that's not going to happen because we haven't got the officers. Then you get certain people in the community complaining that they're stopped and searched, but there are people within that black community that have lost their children as a result of being stabbed by another black young lad, that they too are very upset about that because they're planning funerals instead of futures. Parental and personal responsibility. Nobody seems to take responsibility anymore. A nationwide education program, mentors, people like myself and other families going into prisons and young offenders institutes. There's a whole wealth of ideas and solutions, but the government, I'm afraid, it's a bit like moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic. Yes, that looks a little bit different. It's a few percentage points down. But you try and tell the tens of thousands of people that have been a victim of a knife crime, maimed, left with scars. Even I was as a serving police officer. I still have it now. I don't even look where I was stabbed because it brings back those memories. If it's like that for me, it must be like that for everyone else. So to hear that knife crime has gone down a couple of percent, same as burglaries, robberies, you name the crime, it means nothing to the victims. The victims have to live with it, and others in society fear it.
They've sort of come up with this brilliant idea that we've got these knife archers now. Knife archers are going to solve all our problems. The thing is, when it comes to sort of whacking up a knife archer Notting Hill Carnival or something like that, people just don't walk through it. They go down a different street.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That they help a little bit, but again, we hardly have any at all. How many times have you heard about knife amnesties, Alex?
Oh yeah. Hand in your weapons and get a tenner for your stash. Like that's going to work.
Right. Let me tell you exactly what it is. It's nothing more than a public relations exercise. The people that we want knives from have knives prior to the knives amnesties. During the knife amnesty, they continue to carry their knives. After the knife amnesty, the people that are still left with the knives are those that we want the knives from. The people that hand it in are normally law-abiding members of the public that might have found a machete in their garage, unlikely to get into the hands of one of the gangs I've just told you about. So the circle goes round and round. And every day of the week, only 3 days ago, I think it was over in Hackney, Bermondsey, quadruple stabbing, 2 dead, 1 fights for his life, and another one seriously injured. That was in just one knife attack. I actually post on it, as you probably know, on a daily basis, and I just got my head in my hands all the time. And the trouble is, the government, what they do is they get involved in distraction tactics, knife amnesty, a knife arch, rounded blades. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we're going to do the other. The sad reality is, unless you get a grip of a problem, and knife crime has become a cancer in Britain, unless you treat that cancer and find a cure, I'm afraid it will get worse and more people will suffer and die from it.
It sort of reminds me of that old adage that a good workman doesn't blame the tools. A good government shouldn't blame a knife for knife crime. And this whole idea that just banning ninja knives is going to solve the problem when people can go and get any other blades. I mean, I'm a very keen cook. I'm sure if I was that way inclined, I could probably leave my house this afternoon with various offensive weapons that I otherwise use to debone chicken thighs and go and cause some serious damage.
Well, I think ninja knives have killed about 6 people. That's 6 people too many. The countless hundreds of others are actually killed by a kitchen knife. Well, there are tens of millions of kitchen knives in Britain. So banning ninja knives, as I've just said to you, is a distraction tactic. What we've actually got to do is get a grip. The government haven't got a grip. They just keep coming out with all of these promises. They keep coming out with all these nonsensical targets, a bit of like making, I know it's something you feel very strong about, making women feel safe on the streets from sex attacks and being pestered. They said they were going to reduce that by half in the next 10 years. What is it about the 10 years that this government keep on telling us about? What it is, they're trying to hoodwink us into giving them 2 terms. Now, I'm not politically motivated. I'm in bed with no political party. I've never seen a government so hated, so mistrusted, and that has hurt so many people in all of my 66 years. I've never seen London streets so unsafe. The Commissioner says they're safe. Well, I policed those streets while he was up in them high ranks as a frontline police officer for 31 years, and they were relatively safe then. Nowadays, we have some no-go areas. We have places that are just absolutely fearless. People don't want to go to them. And the Commissioner is saying that London is safe. Well, I'm telling you as a Londoner that it isn't safe. And I'm sure many people that live in London that are watching this programme now don't feel safe. 88,000 mobile phones stolen, Rolex watches being stolen every day of the week. 3 weeks ago in Knightsbridge, that young man from Alton in Hampshire was stabbed to death for his Rolex watch. We haven't heard too much about it. We made arrests. They've actually been bailed. Every murder, every stabbing, every dreadful crime that we hear about, it's news today. Tomorrow and the next day it's forgotten. And I'll leave you with this caveat, Alex. The reason why nothing is done is because a government relies on people's apathy, that the problems, the issues that we face on the Monday, the government will know by Friday there will be something else a little bit more important for us to worry about. So they just sit back in their castle, throw crumbs over the top and just let us get on, and we're broken people. Britain is broken. We've got anarchy on our streets, and it's not just from an angry member of the public. I'm one of Britain's leading law and order campaigners. I care passionately about protection of society and looking after victims of crime. And I'm in as much despair as them because I don't see the outlook looking very good, certainly not under this government.
Norman, you're absolutely right. Keep doing what you're doing. We've got to keep pushing hard on this. You're right, this government aren't going to get the job done, are they? Norman Brennan, former police officer and brilliant knife crime campaigner there. I mean, you know, what Norman says is true. It's this sort of normalisation by stealth, the apathetic public. My other half's been doing up a property in London, has unearthed some old newspapers from quite a few decades ago. And one of the lead stories in a London rag from about the 1940s was someone who nicked a T-shirt. It was a big headline story. They'd nicked a T-shirt and shoved it up their shirt and made off in a shop. I remember when I first lived in London, if someone got stabbed, that'd be huge news. It'd dominate the news for a week. Now it's just, yeah, someone got stabbed at the end of my road. Oh, yeah, look at that. Someone's been sliced up in the street again. Oh, well, that's just normal now today, isn't it? We can't be apathetic against this, about this. We really cannot. It is vile. Right, I'm going to be taking a short break now. But when we come back, we're going to be discussing the car industry because the boss of Jaguar Land Rover has been forced to step down after that atrocious woke advert where he seemed to be selling, I don't know, some sort of box covered in a pink silk sheets with a load of people with left-wing hairstyles looking from left to right. Lord knows what that was all about. Glad he's gone. We're going to be speaking to Amanda Stretton, who's a motoring journalist and a former racing driver, after this.
There's a new button on Google, which, for tech people like me is pretty exciting, and hopefully exciting for watchers, listeners as well at home. But there's a new AI button. So when you go to Google this week, you might start seeing this button. It should be with all Brits at the end of the week, and it basically turns your Google search into kind of like a chatbot. So Google's saying that it will let you ask questions that you were never able to ask before. So instead of searching for, say, best holidays and then looking for hotels and then looking for restaurants, you'll be able to wrap it all into a single search, hit the AI button, and it will just do it for you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back. Now, in my spare time, I do quite like a good car. Bit of a petrol head myself. Mainly things that go about 300 miles an hour around motoring circuits with V10 engines and the like. But I don't mind the odd road car as well. And when it comes to the hierarchy of delicious road vehicles, then Britain has made some wonderful ones in the past, particularly the Jaguar E-Type. What a handsome automobile that was. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. The Jaguar Land Rover these days seem to be flogging, I don't know, some sort of Stonewall-backed, woke, pronoun-ridden advertising campaign with that advert, where it wasn't even, I'm not even clear. I mean, if you're watching right now on YouTube and the like, you'll be able to see said advert. It's just a load of people in really weird clothes, which look like they've been made by some sort of sixth form design project with funny hairstyles in bright colours, spinning around and doing odd things with paint and standing horizontally in rooms. There's one with a yellow mallet. Not a car in sight. Oh, look, what's that they're sitting on? Is that the car? Don't know. They're looking that way. They're looking the other way. What is that thing? What is that rock? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's Jaguar. Now, if I was going to buy a car, I'd like a Jaguar E-Type. I know what it looks like. Very handsome indeed. A quintessential sporting chassis. That was just a pink rag. It was actually worse, I would say, when they did reveal what the car looked like, because I couldn't tell the difference between that and something you might have made on Blue Peter in the 1980s with a bit of Pritt stick, some sellotape and an old cereal box. Anyway, the chief exec of Jaguar Land Rover has now gone. Well, he's going to step down in December after more than 3 decades at the firm. Let's speak to Amanda Stretton, motoring journalist and former racing driver. Amanda, what has gone on with cars? What has gone on with Jaguar? What on earth have they been manufacturing?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. As you say, in their heyday, they were very much leading the way in terms of design and also technology. They were the first company to mass produce disc brakes, for example, which are now commonplace across cars. And they've had amazing sporting success as well at races like Le Mans and such like. But over the last few years, they have been in a steady state of uncertainty and flux. There's been a number of different ownerships with therefore a different onus on the type of product they should be producing. And more recently, in the last few years, we've seen a number of CEOs come and go. And that, I think, has been a real problem for the company.
I mean, I don't understand what has gone on with car design in general. I look out when I'm driving my car these days, and I've only just changed my car. I look at the things on the road, and to me, they all look ugly, and they all kind of look the same, and they all come in the same palette. I mean, at least that Jaguar, like I said, it kind of looks like a cereal box to me. But at least it comes in a colour that isn't black, grey, white or red, which seems to be the only, portfolio of palettes that you can enjoy these days.
Somebody said to me that the car reminded them of Penelope Pitstop's car, actually, when that campaign first came out. So the problem with car design is that it's fundamentally led by 2 things. Well, first of all, it's the powertrain. So that is having your engine in the front, traditionally, and then all of your running gear underneath the car. Since that has changed to electric vehicles, designers have been able to move that powertrain and the way cars are designed and loaded around. The second thing is legislation. So in terms of if a car is involved in an accident or if it comes into collision with a pedestrian, there are certain rules about where things need to be in order to protect both the occupants of the car in the event of a crash, but also any pedestrians in the event of a collision with a pedestrian. So these are the two sort of big deciding factors when it comes to design. You've then got one of the problems that Tesla actually came up against, which was that their design was actually originally made with manual labour putting the car together. When they then tried to automate that, they came into all sorts of sticky issues as well. So there are all sorts of other things that need to be taken into account. I'm on the screen at the moment, for those watching, you can see where they're trying to sort of hark back to their traditional days of the E-Type, which really was probably, and I think many people would argue, the best car Jaguar have ever produced. What they've tried to do with this is look back at that time where they were cutting edge, they were pushing the boundaries. But I think the general consensus is that they got it slightly wrong. It is an enormous car for anybody who's actually seen it, whereas we're living in a time where roads are more congested, towns are more congested, parking is more of an issue. So having an enormous car like this is just going to be more of an issue. And it's also incredibly expensive. More and more people are looking at smaller cars, cheaper cars, particularly as we move into electrification as well. Cars are already more expensive to buy. So this car seems to be, although it is a statement of what they want to try and be, this cutting edge, some may call it woke, but this sort of cutting edge, forward thinking, all inclusive brand, I'm not sure they actually got it right with this.
You touched upon something that I'd noticed actually, which is the general size of cars has absolutely mushroomed of late. Cars are massive. You can tell that when you go into a sort of a multi-storey car park built in the 1960s and everything's pretty much parked door to door because, I mean, I used to drive an old Mini, a proper little old Mini Mayfair. If you got the BMW Mini, it could eat my Mini Mayfair alive.
I recently did some work with one of the new Minis, and I was laughing because it came up to my head, and I'm 5'7", so I'm not exactly small, and this car was enormous. But you're right, cars have become bigger and bigger and bigger, and car parking spaces have not changed. So there is a set distance that those spaces have to be apart, and of course, people building car parks want to be able to get as many cars as possible in, so they're not incentivized to make those spaces any bigger either. And that's why we have as little as sort of 10 centimetres either side of a car in some cases, between, if you like, between the lines. And that's assuming you park absolutely dead in the middle, which of course we know not everybody.
No one can do that. Even with all the rear view cameras and beeping noises. Now, very quickly, someone said to me, a motoring journalist, and I cannot remember who a while ago, but I held on to this with joy. And I'm a big fan of Formula One and know how much racing technology from Formula One ends up in road cars. And there seems to be a shift in Formula One now moving towards sustainable fuels, not towards electric engines. Is this going to be replicated, do you think, in the sort of road motoring world? Because I'm not a big fan of electric vehicles. I'd rather the combustion engine stuck around.
That is the million-dollar question. Governments across the world have very much put their faith into electric vehicles, and there are certain applications where electric vehicles are tremendous. You're talking about the racing connection there. Jaguar have been running in the Formula E Championship, which is an all-electric race series for many years now. They very much put their eggs in that basket. The irony is, of course, that Jaguar's sister company, Land Rover, doesn't really work so well with an electric vehicle. Because this is, again, where size comes into play. You know, EVs is all about range. You can only get so much energy into a battery. So you need to extend that by making things lighter. So huge cars don't really work so well. So there is definitely a move. Some manufacturers have put a huge amount of money into developing their e-fuels and synthetic fuels as well. But the big question around those is how they're produced and are they more energy efficient in their sort of backroom production? rather than just necessarily looking at air pollution. So it is a big problem that everybody's got to address, and it's a worldwide problem. It's not just one that Jaguar Land Rover are facing.
Well, do you know what? I hope personally that electric vehicles have the same sort of lifespan as CDs and we go back to a combustion engine, because I just prefer them. Amanda, it's been wonderful talking to you. I love talking cars. Brilliant topic of conversation. Right, we're going to be going back to politics, however, after the break. Don't go anywhere. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. One more hour of me to go. I've enjoyed myself these first 2 hours. I hope you have too. Thank you for your company. If you've only just joined me, don't worry. You can go on YouTube or indeed the Talk app and spool back to the beginning and enjoy the lot of it on demand, wherever you are. Whatever you are doing, I can be there to keep you company. That's right. So you don't have to miss out on any of the madness that we've enjoyed this morning, especially the bit where my earpiece fell out of the box and I couldn't hear anybody and I looked like a total muppet. That was a shining moment in my career. If you missed that, there you go. Bloopers available because it's just recorded live, so you're not going to miss out on any of the fun. Talking about missing out on any of the fun, what about going to the pub? That sounds like good fun, doesn't it? If I ran a pub, though, I could imagine there'd be some people I wouldn't allow in. I'd be one of those landladies. I'd be like, get out of my establishment. You ain't welcome here. Turns out Jeremy Clarkson feels much the same. This is him talking this morning to our very own Peter Cardwell.
Just wonder, is Keir Starmer still barred from your pub?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, I hate very few people in life, but I do hate that man. He's awful. No, he's definitely banned. He's just so flippant about farmers. Whenever you ask him, it's just like, well, who cares about them? And that's one of the things I really dislike. And then I watched him with Trump, you know, trying to argue, well, we haven't really taxed them. Well, you have.
He is so flippant, isn't he? And he lies. He lies all the time. I mean, this is why he is Mr. U-turn. When it is with Trump, it's like, well, we'll only recognise a Palestinian state in good time. It's not right yet. Turns out about 24 hours later, it's just the moment, wasn't it? Because he said, well, clock is ticking, Israel. We're going to do that, even though it contravenes international law, something that he doesn't seem to care about all of a sudden when it doesn't align with his mad Marxist ideology. Anyway, let's talk now to somebody from Reform UK, Sarah Pochin MP. She is the MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Good afternoon to you, Sarah. How are you, my love?
Good afternoon, Alex. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Oh, it's lovely to have you on board. Now, let's talk first of all about the farmers and that comment to Peter Cardwell from Jeremy Clarkson. I mean, they're just part of a long list of everything that, to me, represents the backbone of Britain that this government seems to want to destroy.
Absolutely. You know what? The farmers are such an important part of our community here in Runcorn and Helsby. It's a massive part of my constituency. And this Labour government, in fact, Labour generally, not even just this government, but they've always had a history of not supporting the rural community. Of course, they'll deny that, but they don't seem to ever be able to get their heads around about how just important it is to get British farmers with British food into our shops and onto our tables. They've never had a history of supporting the farmers, and look what's happening at the moment. And that's why, you know, Reform speak up so loud and proud for the farming community.
Well, indeed. I mean, the fact we only create 60% of the food we eat is alarming to me when you've got Houthi rebels bombing cargo ships and China and Russia playing funny games with maritime routes. It doesn't take much imagination to see how things can go horribly wrong in that circumstance if you're not self-sufficient. And I always think if you want to know how to behave geopolitically, just look at what your enemies are doing. China's got a massive scheme at the moment trying to get people involved in farming because they want to make everything they eat.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what, China, they're always in it for the long game, aren't they? And we know, like you say, if that's a policy, you know it's a policy to take over the world. And they're investing in vast swathes of Africa. You know, let's be under no disillusionment that China want to control the food chains as well as everything else, our IT and our AI and whatever else. But, you know, the fact is the food chain is one of the most basic requirements for human life at the end of the day. Why aren't we supporting our own food chains? But you could say the same about, you know, our energy supplies. It doesn't matter what it seems to be, this government and the one before it does not seem to be investing in what we have in our own ground beneath our feet, whether that be energy or whether it be the food that we put on our tables. But listening to Clarkson, another thought struck me, Alex, which I know will be something that's close to your heart. I bet in Clarkson's pub there won't be any of this censoring of free speech. You know, and again, that's something that Reform is very, very determined to stamp out when we get into power. The pub is all about being able to debate, being able to have political conversations, and yet we know this government with the online safety bill that's been recently enacted wants to stamp all that out. Well, I bet Clarkson won't be having any of that nonsense in his pub.
We'll all be queuing to get in like a nightclub, won't we? At least he's a poor man has found TB on his farm, hasn't he? He might have to slaughter all of his cattle, which is awful, absolutely devastating. Farmers are people who really understand the impact of that and how heartbreaking that is. But at least hopefully his pub will do a good trade. But talking about Labour wanting to silence free speech, I mean, it doesn't actually come as any surprise to me that there's a Whitehall spy unit, which old Peter Kyle, who called your boss, Nigel Farage, a friend of Jimmy Savile, has been heading as the technology secretary, which has been sort of ratting onto technology companies like TikTok, like Instagram, like X, saying, oh, this person said something about a migrant hotel. This person said something about two-tier. Can you take it down? Can you censor it? Can you block their account? It's dangerous. This makes me feel really, really afraid because they don't want to deal with the issues at hand. They just want to control us.
They do. And actually, the point you made there about Peter Kyle and what he said about Nigel, to me, is an example of potentially inciting violence and hatred. I mean, he has accused Nigel and not yet apologised. In fact, he sort of doubled down on his comments. And he's accused Nigel of being a supporter, or at least somebody who would allow somebody like Jimmy Savile to do the heinous things he did. Absolutely disgraceful. But can you imagine the Twitter trolls and what Nigel is now receiving? And yet, Peter Kyle hasn't been arrested, has he, for inciting hatred or inciting violence? So it's another example of two-tier justice. But this whole business about, our tweets, our speech, whatever it might be, being monitored. I mean, you mentioned the online companies there. That's just one thing, Alex. I mean, you and I are having this conversation now. I tend to put some of the fun bits or the best bits onto Twitter. Does that mean that I'm going to get arrested and thrown in jail for even having this conversation with you? Is that where this country is going?
I think the country's already got there, Sarah. You and I will be lags together. We can set up a knitting group inside prison because they ain't going to shut me up anytime soon.
No, me neither, me neither.
I mean, at least actually, I want to ask you this as a woman, because you and I both campaign a lot when it comes to women's safety. And I remember when I first started banging on about this, the uproar on Twitter when I said I was fed up with being harassed in the street by discernibly foreign-born men. You can't, what do you mean discernibly foreign-born? Ooh, racist. I'm like, you can tell when someone's discernibly foreign-born because they ain't speaking your language, they're not dressed like the average Brit, and they're normally behaving in a way which John from Durham doesn't behave like. And so it's very clear, we all know what someone foreign-born is like because you can tell, you got eyes, you got ears, you got common sense. And it was a disgrace that I said this, and now it turns out that we've got statistics, don't we, Sarah? And they're not exactly pleasant to read. The number of foreigners in prisons for serious violent, sexual and theft offences has surged over the past year alone. And when it comes to the sexual offences, 1 in 8 of the foreign offender prison population, 10% of all sex offenders in prisons are men from overseas, which is a vast overrepresentation. Of course, that are men. Those are men who have ended up in prison. The vast majority of sexual offences are not reported. Certainly when you feel unsafe in the street because you're being followed or harassed, that doesn't end up in front of a magistrate, let alone a statistic of somebody in prison. The vast amount of sexual offences never end up in any sort of prosecution. It's vanishingly small to actually have somebody be convicted of rape or a sexual assault. And so I think this is the tip of the iceberg here. But why is it? Why is it that women need to have people churning out statistics when, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's common sense? If you're getting a man from a country where they've never seen an ankle in their life, where they probably rarely see a young woman's face, let alone her hairstyle, and then they come to Britain and they're given a free iPhone when they land in Dover and they go online and they see Bonnie Blue, then they go out, you know, their hotel down the streets of Essex and see the young girls in miniskirts or wherever it may be. You know, clearly common sense tells you that that is going to create a catastrophe. We shouldn't have to rely on somebody going and counting the per head population in a prison, which isn't even, as far as I'm concerned, a very accurate representation of what is going on in our streets.
Well, we know, don't we, that foreign nationals from certain countries, particularly Afghanistan, particularly Eritrea, are 4 times more likely than a British man to commit a sexual offence, a sexual assault, or indeed rape in the worst cases. We know that for a fact. I've been saying it for a long time. I've been called, I've been called a liar. I've been called accused of stirring up, racial hatred. Well, I'm not doing either of those things. I'm absolutely saying it as it is. And I don't need to go outside of my constituency. I don't need to go outside of Runcorn to be able to give you many examples of where constituents have told me their daughters have been the subject of indecent exposure, flashing, we used to call it, but indecent exposure. They phoned the police by people that are very clearly, asylum seekers or immigrants, legal or illegal, and yet have been told on the phone by the police that unless there is physical contact made, they will not come out. Now, I've got a meeting on Monday with the Chief Constable here, to bring that very issue up and see what the police have to say about it.
I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? Because when it comes to this stuff, like I said, when it comes to prosecutions and statistics of the prison population, it isn't actually an accurate representation of what's going on in our streets, considering prosecutions for sexual offences hover well the single digits when it comes to a percentage. And like you said, unless somebody's come and actually actively hurt you or harmed you, it isn't a matter for magistrates. And yet women who live in these communities, where there are now multiple men from countries that have a very different attitude to women, feel unsafe, they feel awkward, they feel at their wits' end, they feel nervous, they feel uncomfortable. I certainly do in London. And then we're being told not to pattern seek. We're being told that actually it's okay. Actually, these men aren't doing this. Worse still, what really scares me, Sarah, is it seems to me when it comes to young girls in high schools, we're actually brainwashing them to take leave of their senses. All of those inbuilt mechanisms that are supposed to protect them, the don't talk to strangers, the if you feel uncomfortable in a situation, you're probably right in doing so. Instead, these girls are being told two things simultaneously, which is one, sexual empowerment is being free to do what you want with your body and wear what you want. That is actually a great thing. And then at the same time, these young men coming over in boats are poor wee things that deserve your love and attention, because if you don't do that, you're a monster and you're a racist. You stick those two things together and we are basically disarming our young women from being able to protect themselves.
You're absolutely right. And not only that, Alex, this is now reaching, I think, a tinderbox situation in the country. We know up and down the country, I mean, I can't even name all the places. There's so many places now where sexual assaults have taken place by this group of people on young girls in our community. And things are going to kick off big time. They already are. When is this government going to actually stop and say, you know what, this is now a national emergency? Reform calling it a national emergency. I would like to see Parliament recalled. This cannot go on. We're up to 25,000 illegal immigrants this year alone. Those are the ones we know about, by the way, because it will be more. This year alone, we can't sustain this. We know the crime rates are going up. We know that women of all ages, but from young girls and people like us, Alex, are at risk. So at what point is the government going to say, you know what, this is now a national emergency. We cannot control this. We've got to call the army in. We've got to get these borders policed, and Parliament needs to be recalled. And what really worries me is about what little democracy seems to exist at the moment under this government. I know we're not here today to talk about the Palestinian situation, but nevertheless, this week they have brought that in with no debate in Parliament. And we've got people like ourselves, and I think the Conservative Party also have followed, as they are doing at the moment, Reform's rhetoric, and are also calling for a recall in Parliament to discuss this immigration issue. For goodness sake, let's get the politicians back in Westminster. I'd go down like a shot. This has to be discussed. This is a national crisis point. And I tell you what, Alex, if we let this go on throughout the whole of August, this is a tinderbox waiting to erupt.
No, Sarah, I think you're absolutely right, and I don't think that is incitement. I don't think you're condoning or calling for insurrection. I think you're just reading the runes like most people are able to do. But, I mean, I just don't understand. Last time this country seemed to face a national emergency that gave the government critical powers to control us, it was because of a virus that we didn't understand the level of the threat. And so the response was saying everyone must stay inside their houses. If we don't know who these people are coming in on small boats, if we can look at statistics that actually there seems to be an overrepresentation. We've even saw, didn't we, in the recent government report on this, that actually asylum seekers were among the number of those people who are part of grooming gangs. If we know that there must be a risk factor when it comes to sexual offences against women, girls and children, with people coming into our country who don't necessarily share our values, why is that not enough to say, do you know what, perhaps as a measure, we should make sure if we're going to stick these people in hotels, they don't get to leave those hotels?
Well, exactly. Once they're dispersed in the community, the authorities have completely lost track of them. And that's where they go into the criminal world. Let's again not be in denial about the grooming gangs that you've mentioned, the drug gangs, the county lines that goes on. These people go into the dark world of crime, and it's impossible to keep track of them. I know that. I've done 20 years in the courts. I've seen the situation get worse and worse and worse. So how this government can allow, and the one before it, let's face it, can allow this whole situation. These migrants now are affecting our economy. We know the drain. We know the cost to the prisons of the foreign national offenders in the prisons. We know the impact on our public services, whether that be GPs, doctors, schools, whatever it might be. So there's a national emergency on every level, including the risk to women and children in our communities. Why is this not now a massive red flag, a massive point where we say we have to stop this? Let's get the army in to police our borders. We're an island nation, a small island nation. We have one particular point where they're crossing, and we can't police that. It just doesn't. Of course we can, Alex. Of course we can, if there is the will to do it.
I just think as well, if we're putting a roof over someone's head and food in their belly, is that surely enough? I don't understand why they're allowed to go around and do what they like, earn money in the black market. If we know a lot of these people haven't paid their traffickers and are actually working illegally to do so, and some of them engaging in criminal activity, we've got the statistics for that. Why we're not saying, look, you're not being bombed, you're not being murdered, you're not being persecuted, you're in Britain and you've got somewhere to stay. Unfortunately, you've got to stay in your room or go do activities together down in the look, I don't want them in hotels at all. I personally think even that's too much. But why they're allowed to just hang around, to me, is crazy.
But they shouldn't even be allowed off the beaches, Alex. They should be, if they get as far as our beaches, they should be taken at that point, deported offshore. It doesn't matter whether it's onto a one of these, like great big prison-style vessels, like a shipping line vessel in the middle of the sea, or whether it's to one of our territories. The fact is, they should never even make it into these hotels, let alone then be moved out into the community. I've asked in Parliament, where, for example, the migrant hotel in my constituency, the Daresbury, where they all went when they emptied it out, got absolutely no answer, of course, from the Home Secretary. But the point is that they should never even be in these hotels at vast cost to us, the taxpayer. They should be taken off those beaches. And do you know what? Reform have been saying that for so long. And today in the paper, I was reading that I think it's Chris Philp has said exactly that. Don't let them off the beaches. It's like, oh my goodness, everything Reform said.
Chris Philp, who was the immigration minister in the previous government. Oh, well done. He's seen the light. Can't wait. Sarah, it's always fantastic speaking to you. Sarah Pochin there, Reform MP for Runcorn and Helsby. We're going to take a short break now, but I want to know what you think about all of this. I mean, why is it we have to just, give these people shelter, accommodation, activities, phones, PlayStations? They can go out and work in the black market. They can stack up the cash. They can keep their money. They can walk around. We don't know who they are. We've got no idea. Surely that is a significant risk. When you look at the statistics, it's a significant risk. 1 in 100 have apparently committed a serious offence. Now, if you look at the statistics, not that you can really compare apples and oranges with this one, but you look at the COVID statistics, when it came up to, well, there could be a death rate of 1 in 100, that was it. Lock us in our houses. When it comes to 1 in 100 of these people committing serious crimes, are they being locked in their hotels? No. I just can't understand why, the risk towards women and girls, the risk towards, criminality, the safety of our streets isn't taken seriously with all of this. It makes no sense. Can you make sense of it? I know you can't, but do try. 03444991000 is the number to call if you'd like to talk to me today. It'd be great if you joined me. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send a text message. We're going to be reading out some of those and speaking to some of you just after this.
There's a new button on Google, which, you know, for tech people like me is pretty exciting, and hopefully exciting for watchers, listeners as well at home. But there's a new AI button. So when you go to Google this week, you might start seeing this button. It should be with all Brits at the end of the week, and it basically turns your Google search into kind of like a chatbot. So Google's saying that it will let you ask questions that you were never able to ask before. So instead of searching for, say, best holidays and then looking for hotels and then looking for restaurants, you'll be able to wrap it all into a single search, hit the AI button, and it will just do it for you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Shall we begin things with a voice note? Indeed, we shall. This is Jordan.
I think we're guilty of falling into the trap what this government sets for us. They keep telling us all about these small boat crossings, the numbers of people crossing the channel every day this year, breaking records, etc., which is a bad thing. But I think they just keep leaving us to squabble about the boats and forget about the real immigration number. What was it, 1 million people last year? And we're talking about 25,000 coming over the channel. The real issue is the overall migration. 1 million people is totally unsustainable for a small country like ours.
Well, it's all of it, isn't it? It's the legal migration, which is unsustainable. It's the legal migration in the form of the government themselves shipping in a load of people from Afghanistan. Lord knows who they are, because they accidentally released, you know, names and stuff in a database. And so all sorts of characters said, oh, I'm one of them. I help the British soldiers. I should come too. My family is 100 people. Can they come? Yeah, of course they can. Yeah, come on in. And then you've got the people in the backs of lorries, the people who turn up on planes and throw their passports away. I mean, it's all of it. It's the lot of it. Ridiculous. Richard Todd in Killamarsh. Richard, you shouldn't have given me your surname. I shouldn't have read that out, should I? Because Richard says, Alex, does a clampdown on free speech being engineered by the government mean that people like me, who frequently listen to and take part in shows like yours, are at risk of having our collar felt by Speechwatch for airing our views? I think you're probably going to be okay. Me, I'm not so sure. Come after me, why don't you? I'll be a martyr for the cause. I just thought, you know, if they throw me in prison, I'll just do a Lord Archer. I'll write some books and stuff. Yeah, I reckon I could just about survive. I sit in here, don't I? 3 hours a day. Right, OK, let's speak now to Sean, who's in Essex. Good afternoon, Sean.
Good afternoon, Alex. You are my little lover.
Oh, Sean, how are you, Babber? That's not an Essex accent.
Yeah, no, but I know Gloucester and I know the West Coast. What I was going to say, your nickname should be the Gloucester Gladiator.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
That has a great aeroplane as well.
Yeah. So it's feisty. It took a load of punishment, but it kept going. And that's exactly like you. You're brilliant. I love you. I get up every morning when you're on at 6 o'clock just to listen to what you've got to say.
That's a form of sadomasochism, mate. If you haven't got your, you know, you should be having a lie-in at the weekend. At least I'm getting paid for setting the alarm at that time.
No, but you're talking sense. You're talking what the people want to hear. And I love you. I absolutely love you.
Oh, Sean, I don't really know what to say to that.
Well, you know, Gloucester Gladiator.
I love it. See, I was going down the line of Joan of Arc, which because someone made a little AI video of me as some sort of toy with a shield and a sword and like a knight's costume, like Joan of Arc. And I was like, yeah, Joan of Arc, that could be me, or Queen Mona Sea. But you know, Gloucester Gladiator, I will take it. I like it.
I mean, come on, you're out there. You're from Gloucester, and you're a gladiator.
Well, there
just
you are.
Like those ones on the TV.
What, like you mean the ones in like the spandex with the giant cotton buds? I'm not quite sure I'm one of those.
All right. I'm not going to go that far.
Let's not go that far. Sean, this is the weirdest, most wonderful conversation I've ever had as part of this show, and I thank you for giving it to me. That was absolutely, well, I don't quite know what the adjective is, but there you go. I'll be the Gloucester Gladiator from now on. I should produce my own little line of merch and sell it internationally, and the 5 people that agree with Sean can buy it. And the money will all go to a good cause. instead of a migrant hotel. Just read some of your messages now, shall we? Hi, Alex. Regarding Jaguar and its demise, I owned 2 Jaguar Mark IIs in the 1960s. Ooh, get you. They were looked at admiringly even then before they became classics. I now own and drive a 30-year-old Jaguar XJS. That's a good car, my mum's favourite. It's one of the last they made over 21 years in production. It is a 4-litre in British racing green with lots of cream leather and walnuts. Are you trying to chat me up, Rich? It's as reliable as my Toyota and does 28 to the gallon. I think Jaguar stopped making distinctive, reliable cars years ago. And with the odd exception, they have got worse and worse since. Yeah, look, there's no good cars out there now. There isn't. I used to have a nice little sporty MX-5. They're still good cars. I still think Mazda makes a decent sports car because it's kind of got the classic sports car chassis. Unlike all these other ones, Porsches are making, like, you know, family cars and things that are like pickup trucks. I'm like, no, make sports cars. That's what you're supposed to be doing. No one's making attractive sports cars anymore. Anyway, I realised I needed boot space because I'm getting older. And so I wanted to upgrade to a car that has boot space. And I was looking on the market. I'm like, everything's ugly and boring. We need to get good car designers back. Where have they gone? Anyway, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, I'm joined by the good old Kevin O'Sullivan. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back and welcome aboard to HMS Madness, Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan, he who has escaped the political asylum. Good morning, good afternoon actually, Kev. Sorry, there I was still thinking the day was young, but it's almost as old as you. How are you doing?
Hello, Gloucester Gladiator.
Yeah,
I love you. You're fantastic. You're wonderful.
Oh, are you jealous? What's your nickname? What's your nickname?
The Hampstead something or other. I don't know. The
Hampstead Horror.
Okay.
Yeah, the monster of Hampstead Heath. The Prowler of Hampstead. Actually, that sounds pretty grim. I'm sure the Prowler of Hampstead probably wasn't born in...
I don't want that nickname.
Yeah, I was going to say the Prowler of Hampstead is no doubt not born in Britain, according to statistics anyway. Did you like that segue?
Yes, I did. You want to talk about the prisoners? I mean, it doesn't come as a huge shock because we always knew that around about 10% of our 88,000 prisoners were foreigners, to which we have been saying now for a number of years. Since our prisons are so crowded, why don't we get rid of the 10,000 foreigners in them and deport them back to their home country? Many of these people were asylum seekers, migrants who came over here, were allowed to stay, abused our hospitality, and then when they come out of jail, instead of deporting them, we let them stay. But I would suggest that the moment they rape someone or kill someone or get done for something violent or dealing drugs, we don't send them to jail. We send them back to their home country. Therefore, we can put our own prisoners in there and we won't have to keep releasing extremely dangerous men like Keir Starmer keeps doing.
I was going to say we shouldn't release extremely dangerous men like Keir Starmer. Which is pretty much the same thing.
Free up a cell and put him in one. Yeah,
he's the horror of Islington or wherever, isn't he? But you know, the other thing is, when it comes to this, we all go up in arms, oh my God, the statistics of prisoners. But we know that a load of people don't even end up in prison, particularly for sexual offences. If you're going to count how many sexual offenders are in prison and from where, we know that it's single digits of how many people actually get prosecuted and sent to clink for groping and raping. It's vanishingly small. And also, if it's sort of assault and harassment, it probably doesn't end up with a criminal conviction. I mean, that geezer in Epping Forest who sort of chatted up that 14-year-old, he won't end up in prison because I don't think it's a punishable offence with imprisonment, is it? But it's made every single young girl in Epping Forest afraid to walk about in their neighbourhoods. And that's the real problem here. The fact that this is only, even though we're now getting statistics, it's the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I'll tell you, I interviewed a guy last night, ex-military guy, who was, after leaving the army, became a security guard outside. He worked at around about 12 asylum seeker hotels. And he told the story at one of them. There was a guy, one of their residents, an asylum seeker, who kept leaving the hotel and standing by the nearby road, hiding in bushes, and then leaping out and exposing himself to female drivers who drove past. So this guy that I spoke to, his name was Stefan, he said, well, I reported him to the police. And the next night, the police went to where he hung out and did his nefarious deeds. And all they did was bring him back to the hotel. You know, some of our foreign residents are obviously getting nicked and sent to jail. But I suspect with migrants and asylum seekers, they get a pretty easy ride. But to go back to these statistics generally, I mean, the most worrying aspect of them is the number. It's not just the number of foreign prisoners that are in our jails. It's the soaring number of foreign prisoners guilty of sex crimes and crimes of violence. Now, it's logical to argue that the reason they commit so many sex crimes and crimes of violence is they hail from countries with very different cultures to ours, with very different attitudes to women, and actually very different attitudes to violence as well. They find our ways confusing. They get nicked, they get sent to jail. So again, once again, we realize that allowing in every year, every day, every week, every month, every year, thousands and thousands and thousands of mainly young men of sexually active age has had a catastrophic effect on safety in this country, particularly safety on the streets for women. This is a disaster.
It's an absolute disaster. If you see me looking down, I'm trying to find something, but I'm unable to do it because I sent a story the other day about a woman who was attacked. She was abroad. I can't remember where, which is why I can't seem to be able to conjure up the news story online. But in the reporting, it's a woman who's abroad and she's been violently attacked, raped, and part of her attack involved men biting her. It's really atrocious to read. And it says she was attacked by 4 Brits. I think it was 4. She was attacked by a number of Brits. Then you go down in the story and you read their names and you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. You sound very British to me. This is the other problem. If you read sort of news stories, especially, you know, Bournemouth Beach seems to be a hotbed of horrible activity. I think they all seem to go there for a day out. But when you read stories about, you know, such and such a woman's been sexually assaulted, such and such a woman has been raped, such and such a woman has been harassed, and they will name the offenders and they say 4 men from Cardiff have been 2 from Luton and 1 from Nottingham, and they're not called John and Dave and Chris. they're not. And you go, oh, yeah, those traditional English lads are at it again. So when we get these statistics, the problem is it doesn't even truly reflect the nature of what is going on.
No, it doesn't. As you said earlier, let's not forget that a lot of these foreigners who commit sex crimes and crimes of violence effectively get let off. I mean, they go to court and they're given suspended sentences, fines, put on the sex offenders register, and then incredibly allowed to stay in the country. There was a story the other day of a guy living in Plymouth. When he arrived here, I think from Eritrea, he arrived here on a student's visa at Heathrow Airport and immediately claimed asylum. No, he's from the Yemen, that's right. And he cited that if he had to go back to the Yemen, the Houthi rebels might make him from them, and he didn't want to do this. So he immediately claimed asylum. So the immigration officials went through his belongings, and they found all these disgusting pedo images of children, really, really bad sexual images of children. He was then allowed, after that, to proceed into the country. His asylum application continues apace, and he's working at a restaurant in Plymouth.
Oh, for crying out loud.
How about this? When you find those images and you're at Heathrow Airport, tell this guy, I'll tell you what, you can't come in, and when we send you back to the Yemen and you have to fight for the Houthi rebels, see if we give a damn.
Yeah.
See if we give a damn. Our system is just barking mad. It is insane.
Right, no, I totally agree. And do you know what? I've sort of nicked one of your lines lately, Kev, because you're the first to really say it, which is when you're talking about these men coming over in boats. A lot of people always say men of fighting age, these men of fighting age. You've been pointing out that these men are of a, very sexual age. And I think... Yeah, sexually active. And this is, and this is vitally important. And I was having this conversation the other day because it occurred to me that when you get all these leftists standing outside these hotels, they're counter-protesters with their refugee welcome signs, they're the ones who are the racists. Because what they do is they see men coming from other countries, they see brown skin, and they immediately think they're pathetic and weak and vulnerable, and they need our protection like poor little lost lambs. They need to have yoga classes and cuddles and special phones so they can phone home because they're poor, weak little things, which I think is blimmin' racist to judge these men like that when we see pure tonnage of muscle. We see men who are able to hustle. We see men who have crossed countries. We see men who are daring enough to get in a boat and pay a criminal. That's what we see. And so therefore, they're alpha males who represent a threat.
You made a good point. I heard you earlier make that point, and I think it's a very good point. These idiots, these stand up to racism placard holders, refugees welcome. You're right, they are racist in a patronizing way. They patronize these foreigners that want to live in Britain, that come across the channel. They treat them like children. They're victims, the poor things. And you're right, that is a form of racism. What we ought to treat them as is equal human beings, because they are equal to us in most respects. They just come from a different culture. So to start saying, be kind to them, treat them nicely, give them phones, put them in a 4-star hotel. If you don't do that, you're racist. No. You're the racist people because you're patronizing them. You're treating these people like children. You're not respecting them, to be honest.
Emasculating them, basically. All of those it is the emasculating men, isn't it, who are standing there with their vegan sourdough sandwiches and they have to grow those beards, don't they? Because otherwise you wouldn't have noticed they've passed puberty. But they're the ones who are basically, look at these men and the women as well, that they always look like sort of weird librarians. So you go, aren't they lovely? They're emasculating them. These men are virile, they're strong, they're capable, they're assertive, they're daring, they're hustlers, or they wouldn't be able to get that far and get on a blimmin' boat.
Well, these virtue signalling lefties are among the most pathetic people in Britain. They really, really are. It's just that all they're doing is virtue signaling. Aren't we nice? We want migrants to stay here. We want to be kind to them. Do you know what they remind me of? They remind me of the most pathetic people in Britain, and those are the people who belong to the Queers for Palestine organisation, unaware apparently that if they went to Gaza, or Palestine as you might want to call it now, they'd probably be thrown off the top of a car park, a multi-storey car park, for being gay. So this sort of impulse to be left-wing and liberal, I've got nothing against that, but with most of them, it is nothing to do with their sympathy for migrants, their sympathy for the downtrodden and the vulnerable. It's all about them. Look at me, aren't I wonderful? Look at my refugees are welcome sign. Aren't I a fantastic person? No, you're utterly pathetic.
No, not only that, you're dangerous and you're destructive. That is the problem here. Now, you know our Cardi P has been moonlighting a few floors down with Times Radio. Well, he had the honour of speaking to Jeremy Clarkson this morning. Let's have a little listen.
Just wonder, is Keir Starmer still barred from your pub?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, I hate very few people in life, but I do hate that man. He's awful. No, he's definitely banned. He's just so flippant about farmers. Whenever you ask him, it's just like, well, who cares about them? And that's one of the things I really dislike. And then I watched him with Trump, trying to argue, well, we haven't really taxed them. Well, you have.
I mean, this is the thing. Did you notice when Donald Trump came over, Sir Keir Starmer said, oh, we've had free speech here for a long time. Well, we'd only recognise Palestine when it's the good and proper time to do it. And then all of a sudden, as soon as Donald Trump's back on the aeroplane aboard, he's like, right, we're going to recognise Palestine. We're going to set up a unit in Whitehall to spy on everybody. He's such a liar.
He's a liar. He's got no moral backbone. I mean, if you think about it, we haven't recognised Palestine. He is threatening to recognise Palestine in September unless Israel agrees to a number of his demands. Israel will, of course, Netanyahu won't even look at his demands. As far as Netanyahu is concerned, he's the dirt. Keir Starmer is the dirt under his shoes. We've completely ruined our long alliance with Israel, which I think is a shame. But the Labour government and Keir Starmer, they cannot claim that we are doing this because it is morally the right thing to do. He's using it as a stick to beat Netanyahu over the head with. He's saying, well, I will recognise them unless you do this.
It's mad.
So if you think about it, in theory, he won't do this. But if Netanyahu thought, well, I'll do everything that Keir Starmer said, Starmer then has to turn around and say, oh, well, we won't recognise Palestine after all because Israel's buckled. So it's nothing to do with a moral stance. It's some kind of weird declaration of this government, it being Labour, socialist, innate hatred of Liverpool. Liverpool? Liverpool.
What came out there?
Innate hatred of Israel.
And there must have been some sort of football in the back of your head, I think, at that moment in time.
Lately, yeah.
but also, how can you possibly be winning a moral argument by saying, I'm going to side with the terrorists if you don't do what I say? That makes sense. Oh, he's a nut job.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Rewarding October the 7th, rewarding Hamas. This has been said a lot, but this is a really dark moment for this country. This craven government just chasing the Muslim vote and throwing all decency to the wind. It's outrageous.
It is. Every day something more outrageous happens as well. Kevin, thank you ever so much. Always good sharing some airtime with you, my darling. Of course, you'll be able to catch up with Kevin later on in the day. Can't get enough of Mr. O'Sullivan. What a sensible old cove he is. Right, we're going to be taking a break now, but when I come back, ULEZ, the blight of London. Sadiq Khan has managed to bank 14 million quid from it already. That's the discussion point after this.
doctors are now saying that he is fit to be released. But there's clearly huge concerns about him being released back onto Britain's streets.
Yeah.
The police have applied for a notification order, which is kind of a last kind of chance they have to have some sort of control over his release. While in US custody, he said that he was a mastermind of the 7/7 bombings and of 9/11. And this is someone who, you know, we're reporting today that he could be released imminently onto our streets.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. Now in the final bit of my programme, we're going to be talking about ULEZ. If you live in London, it is the blight of the white van man. Anybody who hasn't been able to afford a brand new four-wheel car that doesn't pollute in the way that the government finds unacceptable, you're stuck paying these ridiculous fines. And it turns out that TfL, which is one of the most blighted organisations in all of London, of course, because it's under the Mayor of London's management, it seems to be riddled with debt because a load of people push through the barriers and don't pay their way. Well, they've managed to get a little bit of a budget surprise because Sadiq Khan is banking an extra 14 million quid driven by ULEZ fines. So we're not actually talking about the £12.50 daily that people have to pay in the low emission charge. We're talking about the fines when people haven't. Let's speak now to Paul Scully, who's a former Minister for London. I mean, to me, this is basically like some sort of reverse Robin Hood tax. The people who can't afford the new cars, the tradesmen who have their polluting vans, are the ones having to pay a load of money, while meanwhile, you know, Sadiq Khan's favourite people, the county lines kids, are just barging through the barriers. And all those people with their lovely electric vehicles living in the leafy suburbs get off scot-free. They don't have to pay a thing.
Yeah, you've absolutely nailed it, Alex. This is what we were all saying at the time when he went to expand it to the edge of London. But if you've got ULEZ in the middle of London, that was sort of works because there's alternatives. But as you say, when he did the first expansion and then the second expansion, which was even worse, he's just tainting small business people who have to. If you're a builder or a plumber or electrician or whatever, you have to pay to drive your van to just to get a quote. You don't know if you're going to get the business. And there's small businesses, there's florists and those kind of businesses that are not delivering to certain areas. And of course, there's people who cannot afford to change their cars. They're just getting priced out of their cars. They're the least that can afford it in the first place.
It must really stick in the craw of the average tradesman in London who's driving their white van into Chelsea to do up the bathroom, you know, get the nice little sort of Moroccan tiled wet room of Camilla and Bernard sorted out, while they've got, you know, 3 Teslas sitting on their drive and they're loaded with the money to be able to carry out their job. I mean, I heard from someone, I don't know if you know anything about this, but there's sort of a dark shadow of doubt and scepticism over these ULEZ fines, whether they're actually legal.
Yeah, I don't know about that, to be fair, and I think he's struggling to actually pick up some of those fines as well. But you know who else it's affecting? It's affecting us as retailers and as shoppers and the retailers themselves. There was a survey earlier on this year that showed that there are 3 times the percentage of vacancies inside London that there are just outside London. It's something like 6% of all shops are vacant, and that's clearly partly because of the London economy, the job tax and those kind of things, but a lot of it, because it's in London, is affected by ULEZ. So he's just not doing London as a great service, because we don't actually know yet whether this has had any effect on air quality, despite his protestations and saying, no, it's changed dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, again, it seems to be like the sort of left-wing ideology is just untested, unproven, unscientific. It's religious. It is all about a cult of do-goodery. And yet often when this stuff is in the clear light today and comes under scrutiny, you realise it's actually hugely injurious.
Oh, absolutely. Look, when I was a government minister, I always used to joke that I was minister for unintended consequences. It's how you see what your actions might do rather than just a direct sort of relationship with trying to tackle air pollution. This was never about air pollution. It was just about collecting money, punishing motorists, adding to the woes of the hard-pressed motorist in the first place.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, what he isn't doing, I mean, he might be fining drivers or trying to find drivers who hasn't paid his holy low emission charge, but he doesn't seem to actually ever do anything to go after the people who push through barriers. When he wants to make money for TfL, he goes after the backbone of Britain, the hard-working people who set their alarms and go and do work, whereas the hoodies who do nothing and contribute absolute zero into society, who are the blight of our streets, are still barging through the barriers at underground stations.
And of course, that costs us money. Comes back to the taxpayer. But you know what? You actually pick up some of those people for barging through. What you will tend to find is that sort of, tackle the small things. You find the bigger crimes that are following some of those people as well. So you need to go back to when Boris Johnson was mayor, the kind of policing, the broken window syndrome, as they described it, those kind of things there. But he's really giving up the streets of London, which affects tourism, it affects investment, as well as those of us that live here each and every day of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about London a fair amount on this show. It is the capital, and people who live outside of London have no idea how lucky they are, because those of us who do, which I'm one of for all of about 2 days' time, because I'm shipping out, removal vans coming on Monday, cannot wait. The reality of our lives, it really has deteriorated at a rate at which I could never have anticipated.
And it becomes sort of like the New York of the 70s and 80s, and we've got to reverse it, because it is reversible. This is the thing with strong leadership, strategic leadership. You can reverse this. We're going through tough times anyway, as a country and as a Western world. But London itself cannot continue down this route. We need a new mayor.
No, absolutely we do. It breaks my heart. Paul Scully, thank you ever so much, former Minister for London. Hello, Mr. Goulis. How are you?
How are you doing, my love?
Goulis. Yeah. I put a nice little umlaut on your name there. I Germanified it. Goulis.
I know, yeah. Well, some people think I'm French as well. My father's doing the family history things. We came over with William the Conqueror. That would horrify me if it turned out I've got French ancestry, because
my lot came over with William the Conqueror.
And they're our common enemy, and I'm too ingrained to dislike the French.
Proud. No, but originally the William the Conqueror lot actually come from Scandinavia with the Vikings, who came and invaded France.
Yes, very sound. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
there you go.
They're sound people.
You rejigged my history knowledge there, so well done.
There you go. We love them. In fact, the problems all started, quite frankly. Was it Mary I who signed over Calais? Because we used to run Calais. That used to be ours.
1530, I think it was, wasn't it, when it was signed over? Do we need to reclaim ancestral land?
Wouldn't that sort it?
That would sort the boat, wouldn't it?
Yeah, get Lord Hermel on that international law. We think that this didn't work in the first place. We don't think that this, treaty was signed under duress, and we're going to take back control of Normandy, and therefore we'll be able to stop the boats, right?
Yes, exactly. No more French encampments. Yes, absolutely.
There you go. We've sorted it. Get Hermel on the case. Someone said to me the other day, I was doing a talk back home in Gloucester, and someone said, I've got the solution to all the problems. We need to write a new Magna Carta.
Ooh, I mean, not against it. If you're going to scrap the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act, both I think which should certainly, I think Human Rights Act in particular, the Equality Act I think also could go in the bin. There is a case, isn't there, for a British Bill of Rights, although I'm always a bit contentious about putting rights into written law, because once you codify it, people then start to say, do you have a right to a house and right to this? But a new Magna Carta for a modern age, I'm not against that.
I'd love that. That's what we can do. I'm